Welcome to the DEC4 podcast. You can access episodes, companion articles, research notes and links, as well as information about our contributors and supporters at dec4podcast.com. Hope you enjoy the program. Hello and thank you for listening, and a very warm welcome to this special Omnibus edition of our series on the pioneering 1973 satellite concert broadcast, Elvis Aloha From Hawaii, with our leading contributor Gary Wells from the hit website soulrideblog.com. We've created a new webpage for this edition at dec4podcast.com, linking to all the background and our research notes from the original series, and we also set out a small number of corrections and clarifications. Most significantly, we failed to credit Bill Ballew's associate Jean Doucette for the creation of the American Eagle design on the iconic Aloha jumpsuit, and didn't initially give enough prominence to Hawaiian DJ, promoter and local music industry legend Tom Moffatt, who interviewed Elvis upon his arrival at the Hilton Village. We corrected this omission in our 50th anniversary supplement, expanding on Tom Moffatt's remarkable career and his unique place in forging the special relationship between Hawaii, Elvis and the Colonel, and that segment features in this edition. And we note, since we recorded the original series, the sad passing of Gabe Baltazar Jnr, who played the flute solo in American Trilogy. He passed away June 12, 2022, aged 92, and we learn more about his distinguished career as a musician during the podcast. All the episodes are still available in their original form on SoundCloud and in all the usual pod places. We do hope you enjoy learning about the epic Aloha From Hawaii adventure as much as we did. We are preparing for our three-part special for the new year on Elvis Aloha From Hawaii. So Gary, I know this event means a great deal to you. Can you perhaps talk us through why this is so important to you, or perhaps what it is, and why it's so important to you?
Well, it does have incredible significance for me. I believe it was 1987, the 10th anniversary of Elvis's death, that our local PBS affiliate here, or just over the border actually in Buffalo, ran both the Aloha From Hawaii concert and the 68 comeback special, and I taped them off TV in 87, so the both of them I basically grew up with. But Aloha for me, and I've always said that I believe it to be his last great triumph, the last really significant moment in his career. I mean, on one hand, it's easy to say that because it was a major event, period. It was a global satellite special and all of the things that we're going to get into. But maybe it was because I was so young, but from an emotional standpoint, and again, as with all Elvis things, everything takes a bit of a different spin when you factor in the entirety of his life and career. So knowing things about Elvis and then making stops along the timeline, of course, adds to the significance of those stops along the timeline. Aloha From Hawaii, and again, I don't want to get into too much detail because we're going to later, but it was just the grandiosity of the spectacle. And that extended from, hair and clothing to lights in the auditorium. But it mostly for me was the performances have such grandeur to them that for a pre-teenager, it was overwhelming, the performances, the songs, many of which I wasn't really familiar with because they're the bigger 70s type concert songs. But it was so grand and so huge that I was in awe, and it was a spectacle, over the top in many ways, in many good ways, and it penetrated my being and my soul. And because I was so young, I carried it with me throughout all of my life and my Elvis studying career, and it has always been a bit of a touchstone because of the enormity of the sight and sound and a lot of the emotional stops that he takes along the way during the concert. So it was, to dumb it down, it was heavy. It was heavy for me.
Now, this is a couple of years on from Elvis That's the Way It Is. So one of the things that we'll be doing in our first episode is tracking Elvis's career, particularly in 1972, leading up to Aloha From Hawaii, because by any estimation, 1972 was a huge year. There seemed to be a new record out about every 20 minutes. There was Elvis on Tour, which went on to great success. Madison Square Garden, 4 shows, 80,000 people, a number 11 live album from that. Burning Love single went to number number 2 on Billboard, number 1 on Cashbox, a total of 165 shows in 1972, 3 road tours and 2 Las Vegas engagements. It must have been about the perfect time for an ambitious project of this nature. So Hawaii obviously was a very convenient location. There was also a good deal of significance in terms of Elvis and the Colonel's relationship with Hawaii.
Probably, geographically, satellite-wise, likely it was a good place on the earth to do this from. But I don't know. I feel a bit cynical saying this, but I feel like Hawaii was more than significant in Elvis's life because it was the only tropical place he could go. It was part of the U.S., obviously. Colonel was okay with that. We can get into the weeds about Colonel's immigration status and whatnot, and the silly idea that Elvis, if I can't go there, Elvis can't go there. So I always feel happy and glad that he got to go somewhere nice. And if you do a search, you see he was he holidayed there all the time. And so it made sense that there was a connection between him and the state. Part of it stems from that kind of a sad thing that I think, well, I'll let you go to Hawaii, and that's nice, isn't it? So it was a nice place for him to escape to. Maybe the relationship grew out of that, or maybe it was initially a good place to work in '61. And connections were made there. And maybe Colonel in the back of his mind thought, well, at least it's a bit of a trip he can take. And at least it's not a foreign place, but a tropical place that he could go. And the business side of it was a bonus for Colonel, certainly. So that worked out well on both sides.
Yes, your point about the connections is an interesting one. And that is going to be something that is going to be quite crucial to, I guess, what became the legend of this event. So just to run through briefly a timeline. It appears that the Colonel came up with this concept sometime early in 1972, being aware of the increasing use of satellite technology in news events and current affairs, and this sort of led to this light bulb moment. It was first announced, or the details of the event were first announced in Las Vegas in September of 1972 at the conclusion of the engagement there. KNBC News were there to cover the press conference.
It's a long way from Tupelo, Mississippi, and songs like Heartbreak Hotel to posh nightclubs in real hotel settings like this, and even further to the audience of 1 billion that Colonel Parker predicts will view Presley's worldwide concert next January.
Sincere.
Presley joined RCA record president Rocco Laginestra to announce the concert, and nearby, as he always is, just out of camera range, Colonel Tom Parker, there, in the hat, real flesh and blood. Just like the image he created, Elvis Presley, who talked about the evolution of that image.
But I would like to think that I had improved as an entertainer, and I like to get the rapport with an audience. Because it's a give and take thing. If you can do that, it works. If the artist or whoever is performing can get that kind of rapport going with the audience.
Most of Elvis Presley's early music contemporaries are now merely footnotes in the history of rock and roll, or resurrected in some nostalgic gathering. That's because they didn't have the one thing that Elvis Presley had: Colonel Tom Parker, the shrewdest manager in the business. Jim Brown, KNBC News, Las Vegas.
The shrewdest manager in the business. Do you think that was, if that was ever the case, was it still the case in 1972?
Well, Colonel, but one thing that he was really good at was keeping his boy in the spotlight and steering him towards the places he should go, steering him toward the places that would ensure longevity. All you have to do is look at, any other of Elvis's contemporaries from the 50s and compare what they were doing. You can't compare. And what is the difference? I don't want to digress, but I'm currently reading about Jerry Lee Lewis, and what a nightmare his career was after an 18-month period. And what was the difference between him and Elvis? Well, lots maybe, but he didn't have that shrewd guiding force. I think I've gotten over a long time ago my reluctance to give Colonel credit because history is what it is and truth is what it is. So I guess we got to give him credit for conceiving this, for knowing what was out there technology-wise, knowing what was happening at the time. I guess having the vision to see what next step could be taken. In terms of Elvis's popularity at the time, well, it was his own drive, I suppose, that got him back out of the movies and back in the recording studio. Partly it was his own drive that took him back to the stage, and he did build a show in Las Vegas that was contemporary, and he recorded music that was contemporary. So it was a unique confluence of many, many things. You know, most of it was Elvis's way with the song and his finger on the pulse, and to know what to do in terms of performance and recording. And the Colonel facilitated the Vegas stage as a place to do that. And so a lot of things came together, and Elvis was, very much on top in the late 60s and in the early 70s, which, again, no other of his contemporaries can say. And a lot of that is down to the Colonel, but Elvis was able to tweak his persona and the songs that he recorded and his stage show to still be contemporary at the time and to warrant such a huge undertaking as this.
Now, one of the people that we are going to be learning about is Marty Pasetta. He was the producer and director. Our admiration for him is going to absolutely go through the roof. The amount of pressure and stress that everybody was under right up until virtually the show. In fact, at the very last minute, there were technical problems, there were issues. Very easily, all could have ended in a absolute embarrassing catastrophe, and they managed to tie it all together with string right at the end. And of course, we know the result was just this incredible event. But now, some of the people, Gary, that we're going to be learning about, there are a lot of very, very interesting and important people behind the scenes. Marty Pasetta, who we just mentioned, another interesting gentleman, Tom Sarnoff. Now, he was the head of NBC's West Coast operations, part of one of those incredible 20th century American families. His father, David Sarnoff, a pioneer of RCA, one of the very early people to recognise radio and then television as mass entertainment, possibly one of the most influential American families in terms of entertainment in the 20th century. Now, another interesting gentleman is Eddie Sherman. It was his initiative, and through his lobbying to Colonel Parker, made the beneficiary of the show the Kui Lee Cancer Research Fund at the University of Hawaii, which was obviously a big part of the show. Don Ho, a Hawaiian entertainer and someone with whom Marty Pasetta had worked previously making television shows. The relationship with Marty Pasetta, and you alluded to sort of local contacts before, Don Ho would become absolutely critical behind the scenes just at that very sort of last high-pressure moment when things looked like they were all going to fall apart. Kui Lee, of course, Hawaiian singer and songwriter, wrote I'll Remember You. Elvis recorded that in 1966, actually the year of Kui Lee's death, sadly, from cancer. Joan Deary is a pivotal figure. She was at the recording desk at the concert. She was an RCA executive producer and later archivist of Elvis's back catalogue, and her involvement in the production of the double album and also in some of the album releases afterwards when Colonel Parker made a massive deal involving the back catalogue would become critical in years to come. But my absolute favourite, Gary, and someone that I was really, really fascinated to learn about, Gabe Baltazar Jnr. He was a Hawaiian jazz musician, a sax player, had worked at NBC and later at the Royal Hawaiian Band. Now, his significance to Aloha is that he played the flute solo in American Trilogy. And we talk about Marty Pasetta being under pressure. Has there ever been a musician in the history of entertainment under more pressure to get a solo right?
I would be skeptical if there was one. You're telling me I'm going all over the world with this solo? The only thing I like to think, and I would say, is that as with, I always think of the boys at American Sound Studios, crack musicians who had played with the stars. No doubt Gabe had not engaged with anybody with quite the hugeness of Elvis Presley, and the situation was certainly unique. But I like to think that he was a professional musician who was called upon to play a solo because he could do it. He was the man. And I like to think that I always watch his eyes near the end of the solo. Twice he looks up quickly for his cue from Joe Gershio, perhaps. And I'm just thinking, you know what, man, good for this guy. But you know what? He's a pro. He's in the pocket. They say to him, Gabe, do your solo. He stands up and does it. I bet you if you interview him, it's one of those things where he says, oh gosh, afterwards I'm watching the show and I'm thinking, man, this is a really huge thing. But at the time he's punched in, it's a job, and he lays it down perfectly and just, sits down comfortably in history and looks around and says, cool. But he was a professional, so good for him. We give him props for sure.
Looking at his work history, he had worked with the NBC Orchestra, had worked on Smothers Brothers and various other variety and entertainment shows, and I'm surmising that he was brought in especially by Marty Pasetta, because I don't believe he'd had any previous contact with Joe Gershio or with Elvis. Marty Pasetta did in fact bring a hand-picked crew in terms of his technical support, so I'm surmising based on Gabe Baltazar's history that he was hand-picked by Marty Pasetta specifically for that moment.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, Marty obviously was smart and knew the guy to bring in, so he hit that one out of the park.
So now we know, Gary, with the benefit of hindsight, the entire project proved to be this enormous artistic and commercial success, but there's always a danger of writing history backwards. The lead up to the broadcast was anything but smooth sailing. As we alluded to, everybody was under intense pressure. There were arguments, standoffs, actually concerns over whether or not Elvis would rise to the challenge, some potentially catastrophic last-minute technical problems, possibly even sabotage. So we're going to be looking at all of this in detail. We'll talk about the dress rehearsal, the show, the edited NBC television special that was broadcast domestically in April, and also the double live album that went to number one. Also, some of the things that happened afterwards. Is there anything in particular, Gary, that you are looking forward to really coming to grips with?
I'm really looking forward to breaking down the show itself, because in terms of the uninitiated asking me, what is it with Elvis? There's a half a dozen things you might point to in his career. I often wonder if out of the half dozen, 3 or 4 of them are from this concert. The performances are, if you had 2 or 3 choices, to play somebody a performance to prove to them that Elvis could sing, Elvis could perform, Elvis was something a little bit different, there's a handful of performances from this concert that would drive your point home. So I'm looking forward to breaking down the show itself, the performances, and where they stand in the pantheon of Elvis world.
Hello and thank you for listening. In the early hours of January 14th, 1973, an Elvis Presley concert was broadcast live internationally via satellite from the Honolulu International Centre, Hawaii. Although the claimed viewing figures of up to 1.5 billion are now generally seen as a little inflated, the program's dominated television ratings and live and delayed telecast, and then when repackaged for domestic US television in April. There followed a Billboard #1 double live album, a top 20 single, and an immovable shadow over how the remainder of Elvis's career would be remembered. But by any objective estimation, it was a commercial and artistic triumph, a career highlight, and possibly one of the most significant entertainment events of the 20th century. But behind the scenes, it was anything but smooth sailing. There was intense pressure on everyone involved. There was corporate and creative politics in play, and at the last moment, the entire broadcast was nearly derailed by technical problems and possibly even sabotage. There are also some concerns about Elvis's appearance, his well-being, and his ability to rise to the challenge. All in all, the story of Aloha from Hawaii is a cracking adventure, and I'm delighted that Gary Wells is joining us over 3 episodes for another deep dive into a major milestone of Elvis's career. Gary, welcome back, and Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to you, sir. It's good to see you.
In this first episode, we're going to be talking about the lead-up to Aloha from Hawaii, in particular the year of 1972, which was a huge year by any estimation. Multiple records were released that year, including Burning Love, which was a #2 hit on Billboard, went to #1 on Cashbox, and then actually was a hit all over again as part of a compilation album which they released on the Budget, the RCA Budget label, and so that went to #22. There were 165 shows, 2 Vegas engagements, and 3 road tours. During the first road tour in the spring, the MGM cameras were covering that for another concert documentary, Elvis on Tour. The interesting thing about Elvis on tour, Gary, I think, is even though it was only 2 years after That's the Way It Is, it looked from a different era.
It really did. It's funny you say that because through the years, I've often thought that the Elvis on tour looks like deep into the 70s, whether it's his physical appearance or some of the different jumpsuits or some of the material he does, some of the candid behind-the-scenes things. It just looks totally different. And I'm not sure what that is down to. Perhaps, that's the way it is. Of course, he never looked better. So even 6 weeks later, he maybe would look different. And of course, the show was maybe tailored to a Vegas audience. So that might be different in terms of later on in performance. But yeah, the overall look, like you say, it seems like a lot of time has gone by and a lot has changed. Maybe not really much had changed in terms of anything, really, but the look definitely is very different.
That was a very successful film. It went to number 13 at the box office, according to Variety, and of course went on to win a Golden Globe as well. Now, in the summer, they were back on the road again in New York for 80,000 people over 4 shows in Madison Square Garden. Once again, very positive reviews. Another hit record from that, a live album, which went to number 11 on Billboard. Now, Gary, Elvis and Colonel Parker had been initially reluctant to play in New York, believing that the nature of their show wasn't suited to a New York audience. Now, we know New York audiences could be very tough. It was Jerry Weintraub, their promoter, that really persisted and convinced them. And of course, it became perhaps the biggest success in terms of live concerts apart from Aloha.
Well, here's another interesting, you mentioned my man, Jerry Weintraub. Here's another outsider, a savvy outsider who deals with other artists, other big artists, and he can apply his savvy to Elvis and the Colonel and the type of show that they put on, and he saw a connection there. He saw a possibility of Madison Square Garden, whereas before, Colonel had his thing where he would aim for the middle. I don't know, aim for the cow towns and the rodeos and the fairs and the different types of venues throughout the country in the hinterlands, in the smaller towns where they were assured a hit. So going somewhere like prestigious Madison Square Garden, maybe there was a little bit of reluctance or even maybe a lack of confidence or a lack of surety on Colonel's part that they could go over in such a classy place. But the big venues, call for the big names with the big fan bases, and it's no surprise that it turned out really well. And that's the kind of drag that Presley had. Him and Madison Square Garden did, in fact, go together quite well.
So you would think at this point, just the general level of confidence and optimism would have been very high. So it was a perfect time, really, to be planning something, just unprecedented in scale and ambition, which is really what this satellite concert was going to be. Now, we know that the Colonel came up with the idea in 1972, sometime in the first half of 1972, being aware of the increasing use of satellite technology in live news events. Now, he, as we know, always dealt up the ladder. So the idea was taken to Tom Sarnoff, who was the head of NBC's West Coast operations from 1965 to 77. Now, he approved it. The budget, $2.5 million, which was bigger than some feature films at the time. American Graffiti that we talked about last time, a case in point, and actually also more than $1 million more expensive than Elvis on tour. So, they were very serious about this project from the start and obviously had very high hopes for its success.
Yeah, absolutely. Once it was determined, I think we can make this work. Colonel, as was his wont, threw everything at it and was able to attract the proper people and the proper conglomerates to make it happen. I'm sure that Colonel was thinking, if we're going to do this, as per usual in Elvis world, we have to go really big, and we see that already in the planning stages.
So just a little interesting aside about Tom Sarnoff. Now, he was the son of David Sarnoff, who is an example of one of those remarkable 20th century American stories. Eastern European immigrant, he began working at American Marconi, recognised very early the potential of radio as a means of mass entertainment, became a pioneering president of RCA, orchestrated the founding of NBC as a radio broadcaster, and David Sarnoff was also the driving force behind what would become RKO Radio Pictures, which was, the ultimate example of vertical integration in terms of controlling the production, distribution, and exhibition. And that was actually a joint venture between RCA, the distributor Film Booking Office of America, and the Keith Olby Orpheum Theatre chain. And David Sarnoff retired in 1970, a year before his death. So the Sarnoff family, it's quite a pedigree that Tom Sarnoff had.
Yeah, it's another fascinating story and the basis for another series of podcasts about dynasties in Hollywood and in the entertainment business. It's a fascinating tangent we could go on about all the names that you could bring up and how some of these second generation guys inherited things, and you would, maybe be skeptical thinking just because he's the son. But a lot of times the second generation takes it to the next level and are perhaps even bigger visionaries than their dad. So it's a fascinating story and an interesting tangent we could definitely go down, yeah.
So it's also an example of, I guess, at this particular time, how Colonel Parker was able to use these contacts and friendships to get access to, as we know, he was on first names with Jim Aubrey at MGM, who was the corporate head of MGM, and would deal with him, in a very friendly and cordial way. And there wouldn't have been perhaps too many talent managers at that time with such access to the very top of these entertainment corporations.
No, that's for sure. And I can't think of any, and mainly because of, at least in the realm of longevity, just the fact that Colonel had been doing this with one successful property for so long, then he would have cemented these relationships. I mean, there might have been other managers who had a successful stable of artists for a short period of time that might have penetrated deep within the ranks of the film studios, etc. But, Colonel had done that in 56 and almost every year since then, never mind Hollywood and the record business. So he would have a full Rolodex of names, and nobody that he would have called would have needed to have been reminded of who he was. I mean, nobody forgets the Colonel, so it would have been a really quick first name greeting and let's get down to business. And like I say, he had the property. He had Elvis Presley, so anybody that he called was going to be listening for sure.
I think it's fair to say there might have been a bit of a love-hate sort of relationship there with some aspects of RCA, and we'll find out more about that in our final episode when we talk about some of the things that happened after Aloha, and in particular a deal that was done with Elvis's back catalogue, which had major implications for the future. We move now to the second Las Vegas engagement of 1972. At the conclusion of that, there was a press conference with Elvis and Rocco Laginestra, the president of RCA Records. This got a lot of network news coverage, and this was when the details of the satellite broadcast were first announced. Elvis's most significant contribution to that press conference relating to the upcoming satellite concert really seemed to be shaking his head and saying he just perhaps couldn't comprehend the enormity of it.
South Vietnam. The Armed Forces Network will pick it up. The Armed Forces will show.
This is the first time that I've seen this myself.
This is just the start, Elvis. And I really should start this conference off by congratulating Elvis, because we will have two new firsts. The first involves Elvis as the first performer to do a worldwide live concert via satellite. Real spectacular. And the second is that we will have a worldwide album via satellite. All of this has been made possible by the joint efforts of a lot of people, and especially including Colonel Tom Parker. Elvis, again, my congratulations for this spectacular.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It's very hard to comprehend it because in 15 years it's hard to comprehend that happening. To all the countries all over the world via satellite, it's very difficult to comprehend. A live concert, to me, is exciting because of all the...
It's a really telling few minutes of footage, but what it tells, I'm not sure. We could debate. Unfailingly polite, game, up for whatever is on the schedule that day, and professional, but not seeming to be too into what's going on, but still a pro always.
His courtesy and good manners and generosity in terms of the way that he deals with questions and the way he relates to people is a real lesson, I think, for everybody. So the announcement's been made, and of course we need someone to steer the project. The gentleman brought in Marty Pasetta as producer-director. Now, he had directed the Oscars in 1972, would in fact go on to direct every Oscars telecast until 1988. Very experienced with entertainment, variety, and event television. He did have a connection with Hawaii, having worked with Don Ho on some TV specials, and we'll find out that this relationship would pay huge dividends in the final, very fraught moments before the actual broadcast. Now, Gary, Marty Pasetta, I'm just interested in your comments in terms of the fact you made a great point in our previous podcasts on Elvis, That's the Way It Is, about the importance of these key collaborators that come in, Chips Moman from American Studios, Steve Binder from the Comeback Special, Dennis Sanders, the director of Elvis, That's the Way It Is. These guys are, very good in their own field. They're confident, they're tough, they don't compromise. And the collaboration in all of these cases came up really with something, quite remarkable. And would it be fair to say, do you think, that Marty Pasetta would actually fall into this category?
Absolutely. And I'm thinking professional integrity. I'm thinking these guys, the names you mentioned, are some of the coolest players in Elvis world because they don't necessarily ride for the brand or play for the badge. They're professionals that work in the business, and they have their own thing. They have their own thing going on. They have their own careers going on. They've had lots of success with other artists other than Elvis and the Colonel, thank you very much. I mean, Chips Moman is a great example. Maybe one of the first. There might have been some film directors who fit into this category. But Marty Pasetta, I mean, think about the Bing Crosby specials I learned about. He did a dozen of them. And I mean, we can argue the comparisons, but I'm not sure if there's a bigger cultural, historical figure in 20th century entertainment than Bing Crosby. And who does he call 15 times, whatever it was? Marty Pasetta. So he's worked with everybody in the business, Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, everybody but the Beatles, I guess, really. So here's a guy that doesn't want to dance to the tune, doesn't want to do what Colonel wants, or even what Elvis wants, really. They have a vision. They're professionals. And guess what? When this episode of their lives wrap, they have to go back into the business with their integrity intact. They have to get another job. They have to get the next job. They have to continue to work at the highest level in entertainment. And they don't want that on their CV. Oh yeah, he did that with Elvis, but gosh, he really catered to them and it's not really a good product. He took Elvis to a different level. He challenged him. And it's a fascinating little mini episode or blog post in there about these players who were not swayed by the aura, did a good job, and challenged Elvis, took him to the next level. So Pasetta absolutely falls into that category. Now,
Marty Pasetta went on, he had a remarkable career in television. As we said, he went on to direct the Oscars until 1988. He worked with the Beach Boys. Now, unfortunately, he did meet with a very sad end in 2015, aged 82, in quite a freakish road traffic accident. So this is from Variety, May 22nd, 2015. Pasetta was struck by a car he had just exited in La Quinta, California, Riverside County. He died at the scene. The driver had stopped his vehicle to drop off Pasetta and another passenger, according to the sheriff's department. The driver went to exit the vehicle but accidentally left the car's transmission engaged, causing him to crash into his passengers. Marty Pasetta was killed sadly, and the other passenger was seriously injured, and I gather the driver was arrested for drunk driving. So it's I guess any end is sad, but that is a particularly sad end for Marty Pasetta, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a tough way to go. The guy, works hard all his life, makes it to 82, and ends up dying in such a freakish, sad, senseless, avoidable way. So that is a shame for Marty.
So Marty Pasetta is brought in, and he was not initially told who would be the star of the program. He was asked if he would like to produce and direct the first entertainment global satellite broadcast. He, of course, said yes, and he really didn't find out who he was going to be working with until November, and he went to an Elvis concert in Long Beach. Now, in some interviews, he had misremembered this as seeing Elvis in Santa Monica, but it was actually at Long Beach Arena that he saw Elvis to get a feel for the show. Now, Marty Pasetta thought that the music was strong, but the presentation of the show was boring, and he was sufficiently concerned to go to NBC management. He was interviewed by the Palm Springs Desert Sun in 2013, and this is what he told them. Talking about Elvis, he said, "He stood there like a lump. He didn't do anything. I went back to NBC and said, 'Hey guys, what am I going to do with this guy? It doesn't look like he's going to move.' And the management apparently replied, 'That's your problem.'" Now, we should also just mention, Gary, that in other interviews, Marty Pasetta's language has been a little bit softer. For instance, where in the Palm Springs Desert Sun, he's quoted as saying that's your problem, or the management is quoted as saying that's your problem. In other interviews in the same context, he said that he was just granted freedom to do whatever he wanted to do. So his language has been a little bit softer in some other interviews. But then, of course, he meets with the Colonel Parker, and that was not an easy meeting because Marty Pasetta had worked on staging designs and lighting, and the Colonel fairly robustly rejected all of these ideas. Marty Pasetta then, not to be dissuaded, asked to be, to meet Elvis personally and put these concepts to him, which he did. Now, Gary, there was a famous meeting involving the Memphis Mafia, sunglasses inside, guns on the table, quite literally, and a happy ending. Can you perhaps talk us through this meeting?
Well, it's one of those times you want to see filmed by somebody good at such things. I mean, and it is a great tale, Elvis world, with the boys. And who knows what they were thinking? I mean, how many times had somebody met with them and it was some clown and it didn't work out or whatever? And it was all a game to them, no doubt, these Southern boys who found themselves in Wonderland all of a sudden. And their leader is fearless. He's unique, to say the least. And the guns, he was a big gun guy, so they're big gun guys. The sunglasses, the intimidation. It was a game. And like I say, they don't know. They're probably assuming, oh, here we go again, somebody. But when Marty ends up not being one of those, when Marty ends up challenging Elvis, it was fascinating, and it'd be great to see that. Marty was blunt with Elvis and said, "Look, man, you need to lose weight. I need to know that I'm working with somebody who's into it, who's dynamic and ready to perform, because this is going to be historic. And, word around town is you're pretty good at this, so let's see that." And he probably thought, what am I going to do? Just kowtow to these guys and be intimidated? Or am I in a business and doing a job here? So he challenged Elvis, and Elvis's reaction, great part of the story.
So Marty Pasetta recalls, Elvis sat straight and the guys on either side of him took out their guns and laid them on the table. "And if you don't think I was scared, you're crazy." And Marty Pasetta then says, Elvis jumped out of his chair, grabbed me, put his arms around me and said, "You're the first person who was ever honest with me. I will lose the weight for you." And Elvis also said, "We'll make super magic for the tube together." And as to the Colonel's objections, Marty Pasetta said, "Elvis said to me, 'The Colonel controls my business. I control my creativity and my music and my show. He has nothing to say about that. You will deal with Joe Esposito." So poor Joe, a very tough job he had at times, being the the mediator between all of this. But so he was sort of stuck in the middle again.
Well, it's funny. I think of something like Albert Einstein in a third grade math class. I mean, Elvis in entertainment, he could do anything, had done everything. And, things got boring to him pretty fast because I can blow the roof off a showroom in Vegas in my sleep. And this is too easy. So meeting a guy like Marty and Marty throwing the gauntlet down, it challenged, just like Binder and Moman before him, they challenged him and he must have been right up for it then. And like you say, jumped up and hugged him, probably out of he was thrilled. He was thrilled. Here's a guy who's going to challenge me and take me to the next level. Let's get it on. So that's an exciting part of this story for sure.
We should also just mention the choice of location. Hawaii obviously had benefits in terms of geography for the time that the broadcast would go out, but there was a close relationship there dating back to 1961. There was a lot of affection for Elvis because of the benefit concert he did to raise money for the USS Arizona Memorial, and of course the 3 movies that he made there. Can you perhaps give us a little sense of the relationship between Elvis and Hawaii?
Well, interestingly, I can imagine it came about fairly accidentally and strictly from a business standpoint. I mean, a script, we're going to go to Hawaii to make a movie, Blue Hawaii. We're going to, it's one of the 50 states. It's still within the country, so we can all go there and work and film on location, which is always huge. And Blue Hawaii being so incredibly successful, the film and the soundtrack, and with the Arizona concert happening at the same time, it cemented relations there. I'm sure Colonel and even Elvis to some extent formed connections and business connections, but certainly a love. Elvis and his gang I could see them certainly latching on to a place like Hawaii, loving such a tropical place that was within the country. So that was cemented from that point. And then, of course, through Girls, 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 which I grew up having really no idea that it was taking place in Hawaii. You might think I'm an idiot because of the location and look at how beautiful this place is, but it's never actually mentioned in the film. So I don't know how you're supposed to know that, especially as a young kid like I was. And then Paradise Hawaiian Style later on. So, Hawaii was a vacation place. It was a business place. It was a place where he had Colonel and Presley both were making connections. And let's face it, Hawaii, it's a wonderful tropical holiday place to go within your own country if you're American. So it made perfect sense. And as we'll get into, I suppose, geographically for a satellite thing, that point on Earth made good sense too. So it's all coming together, Hawaii, and Hawaii becomes this place, an actual physical place in Elvis world that resonates with the fans, and it did with Presley himself.
So the third of the 3 movies that was made in Hawaii was Paradise Hawaiian Style, and that was probably I think is probably the first Elvis movie that I remember seeing, and I loved it because of the cars and the helicopters and just that was all fantastic. But one thing that always fascinated me, there were times that it seemed to be almost more a star vehicle for the child singer and entertainer Donna Butterworth, and it was almost got the idea there were places Elvis Elvis was consigned into a bit of a supporting role as it looked like they were really trying to build her up in that, and I just wonder what the Colonel thought of that.
Head shaker, and you had to go there. Donna Butterworth, yeah, Colonel normally so good at this. Like, he bristled when gorgeous Anne Margaret had screen time, but he lets this go on. He must have been at the tables in Vegas. Maybe he missed this or something, but few people know. But James Shigata, his co-star, who met an untimely end in Die Hard later on, he was a popular singer in Japan. He was known as the Frank Sinatra of Japan. Okay. So here's this film with 2 major singers, yet Donna Butterworth is handed the mic. Yeah, what a nightmare. So I'm not sure what happened there, and it really suffers, but it ties in with that Colonel plan for Elvis in Hollywood, family entertainment. Make something that the whole family can go and see, and, a kid singing, what's cuter than that? So many sitcoms add the baby to the cast later on. So that was obviously what was going on there. But the film The film kind of suffers because of that. It's inexplicable, and let's move on from Donna Butterworth.
Okay, well, we will actually move on to Hawaii because in November of 1972, Elvis was there for 3 shows at the same venue at the Honolulu International Centre on November 17th and 18th. The shows were reviewed by Wayne Harada, a writer for the Honolulu Advertiser, and he would go on to review the satellite concert and write a wonderful review of that. Some of his lines, I think, have sort of become the official or the definitive account, and we will go through Wayne Harada's review of that show later on. But this is what he had to say about Elvis in Hawaii on November 17th and 18th. 1972. Elvis Presley remains one of the most electrifying showbiz marvels, an incandescent musical force who's a legend in his own time, and the 26,000 fans who took in his 3 sellouts at the HIC Arena over the weekend will long remember Presley's mystique, the charisma, and that indelible animal magnetism. And, Gary, I'm pleased to say he even had some nice things to say about Jackie Kahane, who was the warm-up comedian, and he got a very, very hard time in New York. Jackie Kahane often was the brunt of some negativity in the critical reviews, but Wayne Harada was pretty happy with him. Comic Jackie Kahane turned out to be a pleasant opening surprise. His gags are witty, timely, and above all, clean. And unlike so many others, Kahane quits when he's ahead, never overstaying his welcome. So it's nice that poor Jackie, who had perhaps one of the toughest jobs in show business, it was nice that he got credit there.
Yeah, you're the guy that stands between Elvis and his adoring fans. I mean, what a trooper, Kahane. So interesting that he even got a paragraph spent on him in the review. So that's good. Get some love for Jackie. A couple of days after the concerts, there's another press conference at the Rainbow Rib Room at the Hilton Hawaiian Village Hotel, and the announcement was made there that the show would benefit the Kui Lee Cancer charity. As ever, Elvis was, looking very relaxed but unfailingly polite. The concept of the benefit for the Kui Lee Cancer Fund was at the request of Eddie Sherman, who was a very well thought of entertainment writer for the Honolulu Advertiser and various other publications. He said this: I had started the Kui Lee Cancer Fund through my column for a doctor at the University of Hawaii doing cancer research. Lee was the legendary songwriter who died of cancer at 34. In the TV concert, Elvis sang Kui Lee's most famous tune, I'll Remember You, to millions of global viewers. Thanks to Elvis and Colonel Tom Parker, his manager, I received for the fund a check for $75,000 from the live concert gate. The audience was allowed in via their own contributions. Some kids saw the show for only 10 cents. The next day, Elvis and the Colonel took out full-page newspaper ads thanking Hawaii. Eddie Sherman passed away in 2013 at the age of 88. It's all starting to come together. It's a great part of this whole thing that it was a charitable endeavor. And it wasn't even a generic or even a worldwide sort of thing that we've all heard of and we all know of. It was very specifically Hawaiian, honoring somebody very specifically Hawaiian, Kui Lee. And, the money generated there in Hawaii stayed there and benefited people, went where it should have gone. And it's a nice part of this whole story that it was done for charity. And the kids getting in for 10 cents, what a nice footnote. People were, encouraged to give what they could. It was a donation thing. So it's all starting to come together, and everybody's starting to look, not that they're doing this for this reason, but to look really good, and that this is not just, let's make a bag of money, let's do a satellite show, but let's benefit something. So that definitely is you can't overstate that. That's a nice part of this whole story, and it bears talking about definitely.
So we're now in January 1973, and Elvis actually arrived in Hawaii on January the 9th, day after his birthday. Now, he was airlifted by helicopter from the airport to the Hilton Hawaiian Village, where there was a filmed greeting by the fans. He also had a few brief words with local media.
Coming up to get lays from the crowd. Hey, Elvis, how are you?
How are you?
Good to see you. Welcome back.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
You look
glad
great.
to be back. Thank you very
Happy birthday,
much.
one day late.
Thank you very much.
Nice reception, huh?
Yeah, very, very nice. Yeah.
How long you be in town this time, do you think?
About a week, I would imagine.
It's going to be a big show Saturday.
Oh,
it's Sunday morning.
It's got to be, I hope it's good, you know.
I'm sure it will be.
I'm going to do my best.
Elvis, you got a lot of people here want to give you lays and say hello to you.
Okay, fantastic.
It's the biggest one since Alaska.
It's the biggest thing I've ever done.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Elvis.
Appreciate it.
Now, this was all set up, of course, but even though it was, the excitement on the faces of the people waiting there is genuine. And as we've seen in other places as well where fans are gathering, it's not just the women that are getting a little bit overexcited. You know, there's some very big happy smiles and a lot of excitement on the faces of the guys in the crowd as well, isn't there?
Sure, yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to watch and I'm thinking, well, sure, they're happy and smiling. Look at them. They're in Hawaii. The guy, just walks out of the ocean, cross the beach. He's got his shirt off. He's happy already. But Elvis coming in, yeah, the guys, people in general just went over the moon. And guys weren't immune to that. They were right into it too. It's fun to watch him arrive there. It's really exciting.
Now, we start to get a sense of just the pressure that Marty Pasetta and his crew are under. And of course, we write history backwards. So we know that it was a massive success, and we know that it was a ratings triumph. That we know that it just went off flawlessly. In the days leading up to it, there were no guarantees, just the pressure that everyone was under. It's just, short of being a general in an army or being a surgeon saving lives, you cannot imagine someone under more pressure than Marty Pasetta in these few days, can you?
No, and I mean, it's fascinating, some of the facts that you brought up that we'll get into, the things that he had to deal with. But I mean, this is what, Marty, when he wakes up in the morning, this is probably what he lives for. I mean, maybe he didn't expect it would be this difficult or get this crazy, but, the ace was in his place and he was ready to put out the fires and to direct the troops, as you say. So, yeah, but definitely a monumental undertaking, as all historical things are, but if the right people are in place, it comes off, and Marty was the guy for sure. Okay,
so a huge amount of studio equipment, the lighting rig, the stage design, all of this reduced the capacity of the Honolulu International Center by over 2,000. So the actual in-person audience for the dress rehearsal concert and the satellite concert would be 6,000, a couple of thousand less than the actual capacity for a normal concert. It's interesting when you look at the staging and the lighting, which is just works so incredibly well. You can understand why Marty Pasetta was a little bit concerned having gone to Long Beach because, and we'll actually put a picture of this in the newsletter, the usual Elvis stage in an arena, essentially they would just plonk a stage on the arena floor. There'd be seating behind the stage. They'd hoik the speakers on chains up to the ceiling so it wouldn't impinge on seating. Really, by the time they put the orchestra and all the musicians and the backing singers onto the stage, there wasn't a huge amount of room to do anything. It's really just, certainly by stadium shows today, it was such a rudimentary basic setup.
It really was, and things were different in Elvis world, as we all know. But I'm even thinking of the album covers thing. They were just portraits, and his name was not even his last name. They're thinking, why make the effort? Stage show, lighting. Why? Elvis walks out, the place goes bonkers. Kids don't care what the stage looks like. So let's trim it down. Let's keep it simple. Just get Elvis to walk out there. We're going to be successful here. But here's where a guy like Marty Pasetta, who works on the outside, knows, well, yeah, but you could be doing this. Like, you're appealing to Elvis's fans, but if we jazz it up with a stage, with some lights, Elvis is going to have appeal across all borders everywhere. People who are fans of other artists are going to see Elvis, looking at least in a setting like other bands and groups are, and he's going to look contemporary, because he can take care of sounding and in being contemporary. But this is why a guy like Marty is crucial. Because yes, you could nail a few boards together and still have, a successful concert, but let's move forward. Let's get with the times and let's put on a good show. Again, Marty Pasetta.
On January the 12th, they did a full dress rehearsal. which was taped as a sort of a backup just in case there was something went catastrophically wrong with the satellite broadcast. There were also sound checks and rehearsals. Elvis was, in later years, Elvis never turned up for a sound check and in fact never rehearsed, or very rarely rehearsed, and they tended to work up new songs on stage with sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but obviously for something this momentous, he's very, very conscientious. He's there for the rehearsals and the sound checks. There were some very, very serious problems as we get very close to showtime. And this once again is from Marty Pasetta's interview in the Palm Springs Desert Sun. A day before the broadcast, it was discovered that someone had cut the power lines going into the auditorium. Now, in other reports, they actually say that they lost power because they overloaded the auditorium power with all of the studio equipment. But Marty Pasetta in this interview specifically says someone cut the power lines going to the auditorium.
Wow, that's... you know what? Let me just peel back the layer a little bit. Here's Marty Pasetta later on in life, out in Palm Springs, out in the desert, and some savvy newspaper man knows he's got Marty living in the area. Let's go talk to him about Aloha. That's cool. So Marty recalls somebody actually cutting, I don't know, George, I remember Peter Noon of Herman's Hermits interviewed Elvis on the set of Paradise Hawaiian Style, fishing for a compliment, asked Elvis what his favorite group was. And Elvis famously answered the Los Angeles Police Department. So maybe Peter Noon, maybe he held something from that. Maybe he had some contacts down there in Hawaii. I don't know. I don't want to blame Peter Noon, but I'm just throwing it out there. There was some bad blood there. So we're working on a screenplay here, George. I mean, this is fascinating stuff went on here, and I don't know who would play Marty Pasetta, but the guy had a lot to deal with. Unbelievable, right up to the very end. It's
an incredible adventure story. We mentioned earlier on Don Ho, the Hawaiian entertainer. Marty Pasetta had worked with Don Ho on some television specials. Now, this was one of the contacts, and you alluded to the importance of this earlier, but the Don Ho connection was critical because when they discovered that the power lines had been cut, the first person Marty Pasetta called was Don Ho. So Don Ho, and Marty Pasetta said Don Ho managed to get people out of bed. They came and they fixed it all just in time. Once again, from the Palm Springs Desert Sun, the day of the show, we discovered that the backstage equipment was creating a humming sound. So once again, Marty Pasetta called Don Ho. Very short notice. Don said, call the Navy. Virtually straight away, they had a truckload of lead sheeting that the Navy actually brought over. They managed to use this to insulate the noise, and to use Marty Pasetta's words, we got our sound back. So Don Ho was really an absolute critical player behind the scenes. I'm not sure that his role has ever really been sufficiently acknowledged in that he pretty much saved them all from catastrophe.
I'm telling you, and my mind is reeling. You even said it, the Don Ho connection. That'll be the name of this screenplay that we're going to write about Don. Picture him sitting in there in Hawaii. He's a legend. He runs the islands. He does what he wants. And if you're at this point, if you're having an entertainment situation in Hawaii and you need help, Don Ho. So Don Ho gets the Navy out of bed and mobilizes the Navy. The Don Ho thing, you're right. This hasn't been talked about enough. And Don Ho, major player, Godfather type. This is half a Hawaiian mob movie or something where Don is the Don and he can make things happen. Fascinating stuff.
Finally, after all of this, January 14th, 12:30 a.m. and they're off and they're being broadcast right around the world. But there's one last little disaster. Marty Pasetta again in the Desert Sun. Then at the start of the show, my technical director froze on me. I had to cut the first part of the show. He was so nervous. So we don't know how much was missed, if anything was crucial. But, I guess that once again is just indicative of just how frayed everybody's nerves were and just how much pressure they had been under.
But right to the very end, George, It's crazy.
We are at showtime now. Look, in our next episode, we are going to really talk in detail about the dress rehearsal show and the satellite broadcast, but probably just worth mentioning one of the real iconic aspects of Aloha from Hawaii, which was the jumpsuit. I'm referring here to elvisconcerts.com, which is got a huge treasure trove of stats and trivia and information. There were two almost identical eagle-style jumpsuit belt and cape combinations made. Now, we know these were not cheap, $2,500 for the belt alone. Now, that's, quite a bit of money now, but in 1973 it was a lot more. Of course, designed by Bill Ballou, who designed Elvis's stage attire. Both the suits were worn. The rehearsal show suit was slightly bigger than the other one, and this suit also got an outing in some subsequent shows over the next couple of years. 3 belts were made. The first one was never worn on stage. Elvis gave it to Jack Lord. The second belt was worn during the 2 Aloha shows and disappeared into the audience at the end of the show, as did the cape. So that might have sent 1 or 2 hearts fluttering in Elvis's group about the amount of money that had just been hurled into the audience.
For sure, yeah. Always the giver. Elvis, people kill themselves making something, spending lots of money, give it to Elvis. Elvis gives it to somebody walking by. So that fits in with Elvis world for sure.
And we'll be back in episode 2, where Gary takes us on a fascinating journey into the music and also the spectacle that was the dress rehearsal concert and the satellite concert as well. The dress rehearsal show was at 8:30 p.m. on the 12th of January. Now, we know that the set list for the shows was worked on between Elvis, Red West and Charlie Hodge. They obviously had to be mindful of the fact that Live at Madison Square Garden had only come out really a matter of months before, so they obviously didn't want to be too repetitive. It must have been a bit of a tricky balancing act, because they obviously had to include a lot of the hits as well. Writer and critic Dave Marsh has written about the rehearsal show and the satellite show. Now, he was of the opinion that not only was the dress rehearsal better than the satellite show, it was about the best Elvis concert of the 70s that was captured on film or on video. He said this: Elvis looks lean, acts loose, and lets go musically as he rarely did. Burton's guitar is on fire, and Tut literally plays up a storm. There isn't a better record in video, film, or audio of what Elvis did once he standardized the 70s show. Elvis radiates healthiness and sings fabulously. So this was the dress rehearsal. He also lamented the fact that the dress rehearsal concert wasn't available to see until many, many years later when it was released. How do you see how it all came together musically?
It's interesting you talk about the set list had to be kind of unique for this show. Good songs, highlight songs they do well, obviously, but the spectrum, it has to be crowd pleasers, set pieces, ticking all the boxes. Elvis loved so many different genres of music, so it had to be, I guess, a good representation. I like what Marsh says about standardizing the 70s show. Maybe this is the paradigm of the 70s show. The best a 70s show could be in terms of music, pacing, spectrum of songs. Aloha is of course the prototype of a great 70s show. So you mentioned hits, yes, some current songs, some old favorites. So the music, right from the start, I guess, to the ending, with some highlights along the way, all the boxes checked. And the rehearsal show, I guess what Marsh is talking about is maybe because it's not the big event, maybe Elvis is a little bit looser, and it's maybe less polished and clean, which has its merit, of course. The rehearsal show is interesting to watch.
A couple of observations about the rehearsal show. There were certainly quite a few stumbles over verses and a few little mistakes. Also, as Elvis is walking to the front catwalk, he also snagged the mic cord at one point, which annoyed him. And it just sort of goes to show just how many just little things can go wrong. It's an insignificant thing, but sort of threw him sort of, perhaps off balance for a split second. So all of these little things that you have to get right.
It highlights for Elvis the things that, I blew that lyric, or I need to focus on those words because I forget them, and perhaps cue cards or whatever. And that part of the stage, I got to be aware of where I'm walking. And so the rehearsal was multi-purpose musically, plus motion, walking, mic cords. So it really served a lot of purposes. It's funny, Dave Marsh. Like I have in my notes here, it lacks a certain dynamism, the rehearsal show. Maybe he's just feeling his way or getting a feel for the room or for the arena or for how this is going to go. But perhaps the polish of the finished article is so apparent that the rehearsal seems odd to me. But aside from the lyrics, and I noticed, I think during My Way, he came in just a little bit late, which I thought would throw his band off. Silly of me to think that. But little things that the rehearsal was going to work out.
Something I noticed visually was in the rehearsal, the lay that Elvis had on for a good part of that was very soft colours. It was sort of pastels, whereas in the satellite show, and actually I think that diminished the costume a little bit, whereas in the satellite show, scarves and lays were all very bright contrasting colours, which actually lifted the costume. So I guess that's, now we don't know who perhaps spotted that. It might have been Marty Pasetta that suggested that or whoever. But, that was just one little detail once again that they ironed out and got right for the satellite broadcast.
Pasetta, a master of a visual presentation of something like this. It's funny. I love that lavender and yellow color, whatever, together, but they certainly don't go with the jumpsuit as well as the popping red lays of and it's funny how many images through history, how many black velvet paintings or those cheap-looking clocks on wood, and it's always an image from this show because there was some good jumpsuits, but is this not the iconic jumpsuit, the iconic look, aside from the scowling menace of 56, this image of Elvis in this American Eagle jumpsuit, and I read that it was one of the few requests he ever made of Bill, his jumpsuit maker, was something that says America. I don't know what, and look at the collar. The collar, we can talk about Elvis's preferences for collars, but I used to joke with my children, the collar is way high, half up his head, and it's not really even up. If he flipped the collar up, it's like a hood. I can't get over the tentativeness, the way he comes out of the wings, settles into something that would comfort him and settle him like C.C. Rider. And of course, Burning Love, a big hit at the time. And then he seems to loosen up. And as soon as he sheds that guitar, he starts to stalk around the stage, dealing with the fans. And you can see him starting to loosen up. And then we hit some really good high points through the set list as he goes through the concert.
The rehearsal show was the 12th at a very respectable time, 8:30 p.m. The next day was spent rehearsals, sound checks, and obviously ironing out the last-minute crises before showtime at 12:30 in the morning on January the 14th. For me, the moment that breaks the ice is You Gave Me a Mountain, because that just comes together with such power and perfect precision. I think that when they have that one under their belts, I think he relaxes a little bit and starts to have some fun because they can see that it's going to be a great show.
You Gave Me a Mountain is the first one. You're right on that. Marty Robbins, my man, wrote it and recorded it. It's funny when you go back to listen to it, and it's so often when Elvis covers a song, he takes it up to the nth degree. It is the first big moment, but I'm telling you, it's for different reasons. There's a frailty in the lyric because it's about struggles and it's about failures. And as a kid, I couldn't help but think of the line about my woman got tired of the heartache. And if you know Elvis world, it's right around this point that him and Priscilla are splitting up. And he even kind of grimaces at that lyric. And maybe it's a cliche to think that he's channeling that, but at the same time, the man's getting divorced and singing about a divorce. I always thought about that. And of course, I would always joke to myself, interesting, no more wedding ring on that finger, and that's sad, but he seems to have recovered to the extent that he can put a big, massive, golden, square, billboard-looking ring on that finger. So I used to joke to myself, I think he's recovering okay, but it's the first tune he can really bite into. You're right, and like you say, once they got that done, everybody's, oh, okay, everybody must be saying, okay, this is the pocket. We're in the pocket. Look out. We are dialed in. This is going to be amazing. And there's a few more points afterwards that that they reach the transcendent, and it's really pivotal in Elvis's story to mark some of these. I got to go on to Steamroller Blues. It's interesting. James Taylor wrote that tune. He had said that he saw all these young white kids adopting the blues and in a posturing sort of way. So with his tongue in cheek, he wrote this song as a bit of a jokey dig. Let me see if I can write this really cliche blues song. And his version is okay, but I mean, Elvis, you know what? The visual image, you talk about his band being in sync with him. When he's in the pocket in the middle of the song, the camera will pan over. The singers, the backup group is not singing. They're sitting, but they're all clapping and rocking back and forth. I mean, they are fans. They are into it. And as a fan watching, oh, you get pumped. And he tears the head off that song. And Glenn Hardin with his fantastic solo. So we've had two points so far. One is a kind of a dramatic showpiece, a Sinatra-style acting in song. And then we go back to the blues, the beginning of everybody's origins in music. And he's nailed that one as well. So we're certainly on fire now. We go into My Way. I don't know, man. My Way is a funny one because people will ask me who did it better, Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley. Most people know Paul Anka wrote English lyrics to a French tune with Sinatra in mind. It's a trademark of maybe both singers, but it hasn't really aged well. Similarly, in Sinatra circles, Strangers in the Night, non-fans, oh yeah, I love it. Real fans know that is not, Sinatra didn't really like it. Nobody really cares for it. My Way, Sinatra would joke, well, we're now going to sing the national anthem. You know, I'm contractually obligated to sing this. So it became a bit of a joke because of the pomposity of the lyric. The lyric is a little bit overblown and over the top, and here's me, I'm so great, and I did it my way, and nobody. So in a way, it's perfect, but unfortunately, it's in a bit of a parody, a cliche way. My main problem with Elvis singing My Way, and I even hate to bring it up, but, you know, you could argue that through his career, Elvis did not do it his way. And I don't think that's even going to blow anybody's mind. Look at all the years in Hollywood. And everybody asked me, non-fans challenged me, why did he keep making those movies? Well, why did he stay with Colonel? Did he take the easy road? A lot of times, I'm sad watching Elvis sing, you know, I took the blows and I did it my way. Well, I just hate to say that he didn't really. Now, as a showpiece, it's wonderful. The big final note he hits, and it's magnificent. And as a kid, before I got bummed out by learning all these real things about the song, it was amazing. It's a great final note. And again, he's off to the races now. It's Over was a real sleeper for me. I didn't realize Jimmy Rogers recorded it in '66. It was a top 40 hit for him. But through the years, devastating lyrics, devastating. And the way he sings them, you know, if time were not a moving thing, like it's really a really moving song. And if you want deep cuts, hidden gems, whatever, the Elvis songs you've never heard, It's Over is just incredibly moving. And in his hands, it's wonderful. Then, I mean, I Can't Stop Loving You is the perfect example of what Presley did. A country song that he injects with his blue-eyed soul R&B voice, and the way he rips into it with that ferocious start. And you gotta love from the actual concert when he goes down to get a lay from that one woman or something, and you distinctly hear her say, "Oh, Elvis, I love you." And when I'm a kid, I'd be cheering, "Yeah, I love you too, buddy. Go get him." It's a great example of what he did so well. I Can't Stop Loving You. So we're going almost, you know, the big You Gave Me a Mountain, the gritty Steamroller Blues, the bombastic My Way, the touching It's Over, the ferocious I Can't Stop Loving You, and then What Now, My Love. Like, I can almost get emotional talking about it. It is such... Now, it's one of my favorite songs of all time because no matter what arrangement you give it, it's a wonderful song. It's a wonderful melody. One of my favorites is by Herb Alpert, who gives it a great bouncy arrangement. It's the composition itself. Yes, it's a fantastic song. in anybody's hands, but I'm telling you, you could pick, is it 5, 6, 7, maybe 4 performances from Elvis's career that you would play for the uninitiated to say, to answer your question, what is Elvis so good at? What does he do? What Now My Love is majestic. When they come in for the final, the band swells, the background singers come in. It is compelling, dramatic. It is majestic, and it's just drama. And again, it's 70s. Look at the suit, look at the hair, look at the size of the collar, and the size of the song fits in. It's just magnificent. And then Suspicious Minds was funny for me because I grew up on Aloha from Hawaii. So this version of Suspicious Minds was the first one I'd ever heard. So when I heard the studio, and almost everybody will say his finest recording, his masterpiece, his big hit, the studio version is so different, really. But it's much cleaner, of course. It is pristine. But as a showpiece here, and it irks me a little bit how he would almost speed up every song in concert to increase I don't know what, but it's a little bit faster, it's looser, it's just a great showpiece, the way he breaks it down in the bridge there and worries about tearing his suit. It's classic. It's a crowd pleaser, it's fun, it's a great point for him to stop and introduce his band, which maybe bears noting because the band is on fire, it's a great lineup of people, and I think it's Imperial's earlier backup singers, which I was much older by the time I realized they even existed, because for me, when I was a kid, it was J.D. Sumner here. So Suspicious Minds is a great event song, and then to take a break and a breath and talk about the band, it's an excellent point in the concert for him to introduce the fellas.
Yes, of course. So this is the, of all the times and places.
The guy that gives me my scarves and sings harmony with me and General Flunky, his name is Charlie Hodge.
Poor Charlie. Like, everybody's jokey and Charlie's cool with it, but dang, yeah, he uses the word flunky. Unreal.
I mean, Charlie Hodge really should have had a co-producer credit for the shows and was a vocal coach and harmony singer. And he was so much more than someone who handed scarves and, water at the appropriate time.
My young children, you can learn from kids. My young son snickers at Charlie Hodge because he says all the times Elvis cracks a joke, you hear Charlie's ridiculously loud laugh, and it sounds so pandering to Elvis that's the impression a young child gets, and made me stop and think, well, Charlie maybe gets short shrift because of that appearance of just being his boy. But talk about, you hear about behind the scenes singing around the piano late at night. It was Charlie who knew every gospel song and sang with him on record, in concert, everywhere. So Charlie needs some more love for sure. Even though he has that goofy persona, he was not a goof.
No, definitely not. Just an observation too, going back to My Way. It's interesting that there's a discreetly placed easel with the words that Elvis is reading from, at least from in the early verses. And we know also there were some cue cards visible. In fact, we'll post one in the newsletter. The words to Welcome to My World were being held up in cue cards. And, in later years, people and critics seem to get awfully upset by the fact that Elvis would read from lyric sheets occasionally. But, if you look at some of the stadium performers now, there are auto cues on stage, and I don't think anybody even tries to hide it. So it really wasn't, it wasn't anything unusual, but it was just interesting that was there. And I wonder if that had been planned all along, or whether or not that might have been in response to the fact that they did make a few little mistakes in the rehearsal show.
I can imagine that they would have wanted to cover all bases, sure. Even in That's the Way It Is, they joke about taping the words to Just Can't Help Believing on a stool. And it's surprising for laymen to think that a performer wouldn't know the lyrics to all the songs because that's their job. But at the same time, you think, how many songs do they sing and record throughout their lifetime? It's millions of words and lyrics. So the idea that they had cue cards set up, if anything, it's a big deal. I can't flub a lyric and go back to the beginning here. This is via satellite. So covering all the bases, professional. So it certainly made sense. I grew up knowing this band. J.D. Sumner and the Stamps, they shine in concert through the 70s. They are an integral part. We talk about the spectrum and all the boxes checked. And I remember reading about, J.D. Sumner and the Stamps, that gospel quartet thing Elvis liked. Then there's the sweet inspirations for that black soul sound that Elvis loved. Chicken pickin' James Burton, who's got that pristine, perfect guitar sound, perhaps is more country than anything, but of course works and goes with Elvis hand in glove, like it went with Ricky Nelson. Fascinating that James Burton, again, had a vital career before Elvis. The late, great Ronnie Tutt, who unfortunately just passed away, that pounding rock and roll, never mind rock and roll, that 70s contemporary looking guy, and his style was fantastic. I know you're a fan of Jerry Sheff, bass player. He's a virtuoso player. I mean, the bass player's bass player. I love Glenn Hardin. Can he ever play, for one thing? But you got to have a guy to arrange the music and to look after the songs. And with Glenn and with Charlie Hodge, Elvis was in good hands. They knew Elvis. They know him. And they also know, music, and they're skilled at what they do. The Joe Gershio Orchestra with some key players, everything was in place. Everything was perfect. Like, this was bound to succeed because of all these guys coming together with Elvis.
We made this point in when we were talking Elvis, That's the Way It Is, that it was hard to imagine more talent together on the one stage. We mustn't forget also John Wilkinson, who played rhythm guitar, who in later years would get a very nice solo spot during the shows with Early Morning Rain. Just while we're on the subject of introductions, somebody that was now a special guest of Elvis at the show was Jack Lord. Now, there's a bit of a story around Jack Lord's friendship with Elvis, and also the fact, sort of the invitation that sort of had to be made twice for him to come to the show. Can you, before we sort of get to the last half of the show or the last portion of the show, can you perhaps just talk us a little bit through the Jack Lord relationship and the saga around his invitation?
Oh, I would be happy to, because you talk about boxes checked. Elvis Presley and Jack Lord? Oh, these two, Anyways, as everybody knows, Jack Lord was making Hawaii Five-0 in Hawaii at the time. It had been going for already 4 or 5 seasons. And the thing about Jack Lord, I profiled him on my website recently. It's a popular article that gets read a lot. He moved his operation to Hawaii, which was new for a television show. And talk about Don Ho, Jack Lord became the guy in Hawaii. He was a major player. He ran his own show. But Elvis was a big fan. And you talk about introductions. Fascinating that at the business point of the show, he makes a point of introducing his band, which he would do throughout the 70s. Of course, classy. Everybody did it. But it's classy. This is the band. These are their names. And they're all contributing here. And the only other person he introduces from the stage is Jack Lord. Jack had been interviewed, and in my article I specify, and I had dug up the little nugget that he sent Colonel Parker to Jack Lord to make sure that the invitation was reiterated. I want you at the show. So there was a couple of times that Jack was approached. No, really, it's not just a professional courtesy thing. Elvis wants you there. So Jack was at the show. There's a picture I've seen of Jack shaking Linda Thompson's hand, Elvis's girlfriend at the time. Jack was big in Hawaii, so it was, again, the Hawaiian connection. Wonderful to have Jack there, and Jack got some love from the crowd.
One of my favorite actors in the audience, Jack Lord. I got to say that, Hawaii Five-0.
So after the show, Jack and Marie Lord met Elvis backstage, and Jack invited everybody over back to his condo, not thinking that they would make it, but they did. They all showed up, made themselves comfortable. Jack was half a musician himself and had some antique instruments around the place. Elvis admired an old 6-string banjo that Jack had, and of course Jack gifted Elvis with that. And you can find a lot of stuff on the internet about gifts the two gave each other back and forth. Elvis at this time, who knows how Elvis had this on him or got this, but he gifted Jack with a gun, a Walther PPK actually, and it was in a nice case, gold, and my article has a nice picture of it, and there was even some bullets lined up nicely with the gun, and Elvis said to Jack, here's a nice gun with some bullets as well, just in case you ever need them, Jack. And so there was lots of laughs back and forth. I think it was about a month month later, even, Jack and Marie were in Las Vegas to see Elvis, and Elvis introduced him from the stage again, and he got rousing applause, and Elvis even said, "Okay, sit down, Jack, you're getting more applause than me." So it was a really cool thing, and the two of them were obvious dudes, and the fact that they loved each other and dug each other is a great aspect of each other's story. So that was a cool little part of this whole Hawaiian adventure.
And we will definitely link to your article on Jack Lord from the newsletter, because that really is a fascinating piece. We neglected to mention Kathy Westmoreland when we were talking about the band, but her, soprano just soars above everything beautifully. So she was also an absolutely critical singer. So they get the introductions out of the way, and we're now sort of on the home stretch of the show. Gary, how do you see the show running to its conclusion?
Well, again, What Now, My Love? It's amazing that these two performances are in the same concert. What Now, My Love and Mickey Newberry's An American Trilogy. I got fascinated with Mickey and looked him up, and again, he wrote this song, and his original version was half a hit, kind of, but it's, again, in Presley's hands. Interesting, though, when you talk about Presley's cover versions, you can tell when he's a stone-cold fan of a version. Look at Love Letters. He recorded a couple of times. It's note for note for Kitty Callen's hit version. Even piano trills and whatnot. When he loved a song, he recorded it. Hurt by Timmy Euro, he recorded it just like the original. But then other times, look at You've Lost That Love and Feeling. He takes an original, finds the soul or the heart of it, and just blows it up 10 times. So Mickey Newberry's slight version, An American Trilogy, you could do a podcast on this one song. Fascinating that it can almost be an anthem of reconciliation in a way, because it contains, it's a medley, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which was the marching song or the song of the Union Army during the Civil War. It's also Dixie, which was a Southern anthem favored in the South. And it got All My Trials in there, which is an African-American, it's a Negro spiritual, like a field song from back in the day. So the three aspects of American history are represented in the song, and they're melded together, which we could get deep into the weeds and say, you could point to this as an instance where Elvis is, bringing the country together almost. Sure, that wasn't his thing. That wasn't what he did. But look at this song from that standpoint. Now, that's just the song's construction and the lyric. The performance is utterly magnificent. It may be the single grandest moment of his whole career. And again, maybe you should look at these things like a child. When I was a kid and he sang the All My Trials part, when he sings All My Trials, Lord, will soon be over. I mean, we could get a little bit deep and dramatic and say the man only had 4 years left to live. I used to get really sad when he sang that. And because he's sweating so much, it looks like he's emotional or crying, and All My Trials will soon be over. And it's touching. And then we have another highlight performance that I think you've dug up some info on, this flute player in the band. What a moment for this man.
Yes, Gabe Baltazar Jr., born 1929, and as we record, he is still with us. Hard to imagine ever in the history of any kind of entertainment a musician being under any more pressure to get it right. And interestingly, in the rehearsal concert, I think he did make a little mistake. There is just a little off note when he did that in the rehearsal concert. On the big stage, he's absolutely impeccable. Now, yes, Gabe Baltazar Jr., he was a Korean War veteran, a sax player, as well as a flautist, played jazz. He played with a Stan Kenton orchestra, featuring on 17 LPs. Now, between 1965 and 69, he worked in Los Angeles, principally for NBC, which is interesting. He played on Pat Boone's programs, Phyllis Diller, Johnny Carson, but also Smothers Brothers and Glenn Campbell programming, which Marty Pasetta had also involvement in. So I guess we can surmise that he was perhaps brought in especially for that particular moment, because we don't believe that he had prior connections with Joe Gershow or the Las Vegas scene that Joe Gershow came from. Gabe Baltazar returned to Hawaii in 1969 to become assistant director of the Royal Hawaiian Band. So at that point, he was a local Hawaiian musician, but really just a perfect performance, and he is rewarded, fittingly with that great close-up.
It is dramatic and it is emotional. Gabe finishes his solo. The orchestra is beginning to swell, and we see Elvis, who is dialed right in, and he is a fan at this moment. He is loving it. And maybe even subconsciously, he realizes that he is conquering the world at this moment. The band is swelling. I'm telling you, when the trumpets start blasting their glory, glory, hallelujah, you could be on the floor, George. This is a moment in Elvis's story that is just staggering. And he yells at them. He's urging them on. He's calling for them to blow, just like a jazz man would in a club. Like he's calling to them. And when he gestures to the stamps to come in, he points at them and he makes a mean face like, this is just perfect, he's saying to himself. He points to them. They come in with their glory, hallelujah. He turns to the stage, to the crowd, and when he finishes that song, everything is, do I have the words? When the final moments of that song is just everything that is cool, good, majestic, and grand about Elvis Presley is in that 4 minutes or whatever it is. When he finishes that, you are on the floor. It is a moment not only in Elvis world, but for the ages. So those 4.5 minutes, you could even pick it apart. His gestures, he is dialed in. It is absolutely magnificent.
It's as perfect a version of that song, or perhaps any song that really has ever been done, and it was the perfect stage to do it on, wasn't it?
I would encourage people. I mean, it's on YouTube. I've shared it. The camera work is good because you see Elvis, but also on the screen are the trumpets as they start to play, so you can see both things. He's looking around. He's pleased. He's smiling. He's making that grimace. He summons the stamps. It is magnificent. It is just a wonderful, wonderful moment in life. Let's talk straight here. It's just magnificent.
We're really now on the home stretch, the last couple of songs. So how do we run to the end? What happened then?
I gotta say, I'm really impressed. Big Hunk of Love. Of all the songs from the 50s, I have a bit of a beef with Elvis. The way he handled his early hits later in the 70s. As a fan of Tom Jones, I've seen him live many times. When he sings his early hits, he really honors them. He really puts his gut into them, and he sings them really well still to this day. The man's 82 or whatever. But Elvis, I don't know if it's disdain, but the 56-second version of Hound Dog, where he doesn't even get to all the lyrics. Like, he just seems to whip through some of those 50 songs, where really, if they were given a bit of a tweak or on a different arrangement, I mean, you hear him in concert starting off Hound Dog as a bit of a slow, bluesy, so things could be done to them to make them contemporary and cool, but he seems to gloss over them, which bums me out a little bit. So of all the songs, Big Hunk of Love, I mean, he sings all the lyrics for one thing. There's a couple of solos. Glenn Hardin shines on the piano, and James plays really well his solo as usual, but it's a fantastic rendition. And when he gets to the final lyrics, he's spitting them out, the orchestra's blasting. It is just fantastic. And it's an interesting that of all the songs from the 50s, maybe he liked that one or whatever. He really punched that one up. And I think Glenn gets a bit of a dousing for his troubles, doesn't he, at that point?
Since he got a glass of water thrown in his direction. Yes.
Yeah, playful. It's always, you never know what you're going to get with being in Elvis's band. I mean, I remember Ronnie Tutt saying, it's like working for a glorified stripper. You had to watch his moves and to play accordingly, hit the snare, hit this. But you know what? The ending of this too is Can't Help Falling in Love. Interesting for me too, again, because I started with this. So it was the first rendition I heard. When I heard the hit version from the film Blue Hawaii, it was a bit different. It's a bit emotional to me. It was my wedding song, Can't Help Falling in Love. And it's a wonderful recording. And I like the idea that he ends his concerts with it, especially for you, he says, you know, like, I can't help falling in love with you guys, his fans. It's nice. But the recording, I mean, the performance is fine. But I'm telling you, when he whips the cape off and throws it into the crowd, like, you're thinking, that really happened? I can hardly even believe it. So the cape's got an interesting story, too. It ended up, I think it's at Graceland today. But there was 2 or 3, I think. Wasn't there?
Yes, I think there were 2 capes. Yeah, there might have been 3 belts and 2 capes, I think.
Yeah, so, but I'm telling you, that's huge too. I mean, he's dropped the belt earlier, he's thrown the cape, he goes down on his knee, which I've heard, you know, from more maybe cynical press, it's a little bit bombastic, it's a little bit grandiose, he goes down on his knee, but there's something about the closing vamp. The first fan he encounters hands him a crown, and there's something, you could look at it as a non-fan jokingly, oh yeah, the king. But when you think about it, it's poignant. There's something significant about that. He's a humble man, whatever, I'm not the king of anything. The person hands him a crown, and he has it from the get-go then, as he's gesturing to the crowd. He shoots his Hawaiian shaka sign to all the, and you can see him mouthing, thank you very much. The place is going bonkers. He's got a crown in his hand, and it's like, the conquering hero, even the closing vamp as he walks, the first thing, he looks down with a grin and he grabs the crown and he looks at people and people are going bonkers. Even the ending is magnificent and significant. And it's a fitting ending because it's grand. He's grabbing hands, he's gesturing. Even the ending, George, is wonderful.
Yeah, agreed. The show was reviewed in the Honolulu Advertiser, once again by Wayne Harada, who also wrote the glowing review of Elvis's performances there in November. As we said, some of his lines have sort of become almost the official account and have been widely quoted. So this is just some of what Wayne Harada had to say. We'll link to the complete review in the newsletter, which is on elvisconcerts.com. The HIC Arena, with 6,000 fans, became a supersized TV studio for the hour-long spectacle Aloha from Hawaii, which was televised to nearly 40 nations. It was a thrilling compact hour, long on music, loud on screams. Presley performed a total of 25 songs, including a rare and poignant rendition of Kui Lee's I'll Remember You. Like Friday night's dress rehearsal, yesterday's performance was a benefit for the Kui Lee Cancer Fund. Perhaps only a phenomenon like Presley could pull off such a coup at such a wicked show-going time, 12:30 a.m. curtain, Hawaiian time, yet draw a full house. The concert was smartly paced and packaged to suit all camps in the Presley following. There were the old hits, Love Me, Blue Suede Shoes, Hound Dog, Johnny Be Good, Long Tall Sally, recent clicks, Suspicious Minds, Burning Love, What Now My Love, and soulful slices, CC Rider, Something, and Fever, the latter with the classic Presley shuffles from the hips on downwards. Wayne Harada also talks about the splendidly nimble string section consisting of some of our symphony musicians from Hawaii. Yesterday's show reaffirms Presley's and manager Colonel Tom Parker's philanthropic fondness for Hawaii. Like the enduring nature of Kui Lee's music, the incandescence of Presley is incomparable.
Yeah, I think he hits all the right notes. It's a good, thorough review, and I love the word incandescent. I mean, that's a good description. Elvis Presley, period, but during this concert, I mean, he is glowing and he nails just about everything. And interesting that he does highlight specific songs. It's a good, thorough review, and I think he's right on all cases.
It went off very, very well. The ratings were in early. They knew that they had dominated in Japan, huge ratings there. So just when you would think that everybody was exhausted and would be just quite happy to go back to the hotel and try and unwind, no, the arena was emptied. Elvis was back, and they were doing the insert tracks for the television version. Marty Pasetta also had to go to work and edit the live special down by 10 minutes for the delayed telecast into Europe. But they now had to sort of get back on stage and record the 5 songs for the inserts, which is probably the last thing that anybody felt like doing, you would think.
Well, for sure. We all know that when Elvis has done a performance, like he is sprinting to the Cadillac, back to the hotel, and he's done. So to have to keep working afterwards must have been pretty jarring to his system and to everybody's system.
Oh, look, I think you can see that everybody's nerves are fraying a little bit. So they did 5 songs. They did Blue Hawaii, Ku'uipo, No More, which they unfortunately didn't use because I think that was probably the nicest of the songs that they did, or the nicest rendition. A Hawaiian Wedding Song, Early Morning Rain. Now, it's quite interesting, actually, during that session to just really, I think you can get a really interesting picture, certainly of the rapport between Elvis and Marty Pasetta. There's a bit of banter back and forth. Everybody makes a mistake at one point. The band makes a mistake. Elvis makes a mistake. Marty Pasetta makes some sort of technical mistake that he had to apologise for, and Elvis says, well, everyone's entitled to one stupid mistake, in that sort of way that he did. Someone coughed, one of the crew coughed and ruined one of the takes, and I think Elvis had enough, but he was professional, and when Marty Pasetta asked him to do another take of one particular one, he just did it without any complaint, and so that was interesting to see the rapport there. And they finished off with Early Morning Rain, and I think probably if there was any of the tracks that they did that perhaps could have benefited from another take, it was probably that one. But I think Marty Pasetta was smart enough to realise that everybody had had enough by then, and they would let it stand as it was. And it certainly wasn't a bad version; it was a nice version. But how did you see the recording of those insert tracks?
I don't want to say that they're dispensable. I mean, I can understand their place in the broadcast version, and they make good sense, and they're Hawaiian songs. No More is one of my favorite movie songs. It's a wonderful, wonderful tune. I guess they all ended up on that Mahalo from Elvis album that was put out after his death, I think, on the one side of that record anyways. So they're nice performances. Again, Elvis seems like he's done with this. He doesn't seem super duper engaged. Doesn't even look as great as he did just an hour before on stage during the concert. But the songs are nice and good versions. And you could tell, though, it was a matter of, we're not loving this too much. This is not, super great. This is just business. Let's get this in the can. Let's move along. But they work out pretty good. They're not bad.
Now, these are just some of the audience figures from the initial broadcast. These are RCA's publicity figures, so I guess we just have to bear that in mind. 91.8% of the Philippine population watched, 25% of the Hong Kong population. It was actually also relayed from Hong Kong via Macau to China. 70 to 80% of the television sets in South Korea, 37.8% in Japan. Now, we know that the audience figures of 1.5 billion for that broadcast and delayed telecast, they've been questioned, perhaps with good reason, but I don't think it really matters, does it, Gary? Because by any estimation, it dominated ratings live and delayed, and then again when it was repackaged for television. So I don't think we really need to get too hung up on whether it really was 1.5 billion, do we?
No, I mean, it's even if the number is sort of fudged, it's meant to depict the enormity of it. I mean, you can't overstate, I think, the significance of this as a television event. Numbers aside, no doubt, it was huge, and it ranks up there with the biggest. Now, it's so different nowadays. Things are huge, and you can watch them on your phone sitting who knows where. But back in that day, it was different. And so a huge swaths of the whole planet watch this. There's no denying, numbers aside, there's no denying the hugeness.
Marty Pasetta said, once again, we're referring to his interview in the Desert Sun, what I was told by NBC and others is that every third person on Earth saw that first show when it went out. In Africa and places like that, it played in theatres where they didn't have television. But one thing that is, and I had misremembered this, I had thought even the Colonel had been so caught up in the emotion, and there had been a real emotional connection at that point between Elvis and him personally face to face. But when I went back to read it again, and we're referring to Peter Goralnik's biography again, no, it wasn't face to face. Colonel wrote him a letter at 3 a.m. from wherever he was, the next room.
Oh, boy.
So, anyway, this is Goralnik's take on that letter. Not long afterward, the Colonel wrote Elvis a letter, dateline Sunday morning, 3 a.m., January 14, 1973. It may have expressed as much sentiment as the Colonel had ever committed to paper, as he declared defiantly that they didn't need to hug each other to show their feelings, because they could tell just by looking at one another from the stage and from the floor how the other felt. And the Colonel said, I always know when I do my part, you always do yours in your own way and in your feeling in how to do it best. That is why you and I are never at each other when we are doing our work in our own best way possible at all times. Interesting wording, isn't it? It's sort of, it's you and I and no one else matters is sort of the sentiment, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And it's funny, he again, we can say things about the Colonel, most of them are true, but even the enormity of the success was not lost on him. And maybe there was a bit of emotion, wow, look at us. And here is one case where you got to say that each did do his part. I mean, there was a lot of logistical things, and we can talk about the players, Marty Pasetta, etc. But Colonel did do this was quite a Colonel achievement. But again, he had the product, and that's the only way he could have done this. Could Elvis have been successful without Colonel Parker? I would think so. Colonel Parker without Elvis, maybe not so much. Definitely he had the product and it came off well. But benefit of the doubt, maybe he doesn't want to go over into the room and bother Elvis with his friends or whatever. Anyways, it was nice that he took the time, and it was a bit of a moment, and it's nice. Let's just accept it as being, a nice moment.
And he concluded, you above all make all of it work by being the leader and the talent. Without your dedication to your following, it couldn't have been done. So, that is a nice sentiment, because unfortunately things would not remain that warm between them, sadly. But yes, that is a nice moment in time. So, Gary, to summarise this episode, as we've talked about the music and the significance of the music, have you got any sort of perhaps final observations about how it all came together? We'll go into some of the camera work and the presentation for television next time, but just purely about the music. Well,
it's a really interesting story as you've presented it with the background information and the lead up to the whole thing. But I think, I've kept coming back to the product. I mean, a lot of people did a lot of good work to make this happen, but it wouldn't have even have been attempted were it not for Elvis Presley's way with a song, his abilities, and his ability to pull off something like this. In terms of performance, I'm telling you, there's 56, there's 69, and there's Aloha. They are the three major signposts, the major points in Elvis's trajectory that, again, for the uninitiated, you would package something that would contain those 3 years and those 3 moments. And if they are not profoundly moved by, then they never will be. Aloha is the final triumph. I always refer to it as the last time he really scaled the heights and did something worldwide majestic that was not only stunning in its execution and what it was in terms of entertainment, but performance, his craft. We've talked about a couple of the highlights along the way. They are nothing less than the finest moments in a career loaded with fine moments. It's not like 56 and it's not like 69, but Aloha from Hawaii represents some of the very pinnacles of what he could do. And, I don't feel that way about American Trilogy. I don't feel, and I understand it's all subjective, but because I feel it, I'm telling you, it's there. It's there to be felt, and you can see and hear those things at those moments. They are there. Whether you really latch onto them, that's your own thing. But they exist. That is a magnificent moment, American Trilogy, and What Now My Love, other moments in the show. It is as grand as music in this idiom can be, and it's a performance for the ages, and it is one of the major highlights of a career, as I've said, loaded with highlights.
So when you're talking about 69, are you referring to back in Vegas live performance for the first time, or are you thinking more of the 68, what they refer to as the 68 comeback special?
I'm sorry. I'm referring specifically to his American Sound recordings, the work with Chips.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, yep, I see.
The work with Chips
Gotcha.
in Memphis. That was the reclaiming of the crown on the heels of 68, which was magnificent. So that 68 to 70 is that moment, and it's one of the three with Aloha and 56.
Just to conclude this episode, could any other entertainer at that time, a solo entertainer, have the following or the influence or the ability to pull off something of this nature?
At that time, no, I don't think so. Frank Sinatra was, of course, just as massive in terms of, just sheer weight of personality and craft and stardom. And I think, maybe the kids dug Sinatra and they got him. He was cool. He was a winner, but not in the same way as Presley. Generations, I think, tapped into him for kind of the same reasons, because of him, his smile, his head movements, the way he was as a person, as a performer, his way with the song. I think it was truly a unique performer that, he all over the world and all over the age spectrum, he appealed, and I don't think this would have been attempted if he didn't exist. Like, I don't think that Sinatra would say, you know what, for all age groups and for all areas of the world, I would say only Presley at this point could have appealed to the number of people that he did. Only Presley. Well,
I really hope you've enjoyed Gary's analysis of the music of Aloha from Hawaii as much as I did. In our next episode, we'll be talking about the television special that aired domestically in the US in April, also the double live album, the single, and some of the things that were going on behind the scenes as RCA tried to get greater control over the goldmine of Elvis's back catalogue. Gary, thanks to you, we had a really great insight into the music and just the spectacle that was Elvis Aloha from Hawaii. But the juggernaut has rolled on, and 12 days after Aloha, Elvis was back at work again in Las Vegas. During that Las Vegas season, which took him through to February the 23rd, the double live album Aloha from Hawaii was released, and that went to number 1 on Billboard. In March, a month later, Steamroller Blues was released as the single, and that went to number 17 on Billboard and number 10 on Cashbox. So, Gary, we'll talk a little bit more about the album a little later, but how do you see Steamroller Blues as the single?
That's an interesting one to pick from a single. I think also live albums, releasing singles from live albums is always a little bit odd, too. You get sometimes sparkling performances live. You sometimes get more and better, quote-unquote, versions of songs live. Sometimes things sound fantastic, and sometimes things, just because they don't sound like the studio recording, it throws you off. Now, with Steamroller Blues, we didn't really have that problem because he didn't record it in the studio, but it's an interesting one to pick. I guess it was just gritty. It sounded like it would find a place on top 40 radio, as opposed to some of the bigger showpieces that we discussed. But I think I made mention of the fact that it's a stellar performance. It's a great performance of a good song that Elvis handles well. It's intriguing that they picked it. It's a little bit of a flyer, but I can also, I think, understand why, and it's a good track from King, that's for sure.
Do you think they missed a bit of an opportunity? Now, I know If I Can Dream or Suspicious Minds doesn't come around the corner every 5 minutes, but given the showcase that they had, do you think they might have missed a bit of an opportunity to perhaps come up with another signature era-defining tune?
Yeah, that's a really good point you make, because there's lots of, I guess there's a handful of other recordings like Steamroller Blues from the concert that I spoke about, the Big Hunk of Love, that was fantastic. I think that if they had released one of the bigger show pieces, not only would it have given listeners an idea of what they were going to get from an Elvis concert. Steamroller Blues may have displayed that as well, but let's face it, something like an American Trilogy or What Now My Love, it's hard to conceive of them as singles charting on the top 40 or other charts, but I think it would have been a promotion from a promotion angle. He sang them in concert, they were on the album, and if they pushed the single of say, an American Trilogy or even a My Way, which was, popular in that day and age, then they might have missed the boat. But I don't know. I think in general, the album was representative of the spectacle. It was the main thing. The single might have been a little bit of bonus promotion, but I wonder if maybe even they wondered if a single would have done much, because it was just bonus and extra added, I think. So perhaps not. Perhaps they didn't miss the boat there. Perhaps there was no boat to be missed.
It really, it was vindicated really by the chart position, top 20 on Billboard and number 10 on Cashbox. So the success is just building on itself as we go, and we then get to April. And on April 4th was the domestic airing of the expanded television version, sponsored by Toyota. It became the highest rating NBC show of 1973, according to PBS, a 33.8% Nielsen rating with a 57% audience share. Now, this is the real time capsule. This is where we really get to see exactly what the audience in 1973 saw.
NBC Wednesday Mystery Movie will not be seen tonight, but will return in 2 weeks at its regular time.
Now, a special program in living color on NBC.
I thought the opening of it was brilliant. I thought it just built the excitement where you had the Morse code and you had the helicopter arrival, and then you had this real carnival atmosphere at the arena and lots of happy, smiling, excited faces.
I would agree, and I think it was clever, whether it was by design or that there was no overblown, bloated sort of opening monologue. For those who might know Howard Cosell introducing Frank Sinatra at Madison Square Garden, I think it was a year later in 74. He's drowned out by the orchestra. He's droning on in his Howard Cosell way. Something perhaps is lost. I like the idea of the images just telling the whole story. I mean, what kind of narration would you have needed? The satellite thing is set up right from the outset. The helicopter arriving, the crowds, the adoration, the lays around his neck. I think you're right. Everything from the get-go, probably down to our buddy Marty Pasetta, was set up really well, and the excitement was really heightened. And I think viewers at home, it was something to watch. I could imagine silence in the living rooms. People are watching, and it must have been pretty exciting. I agree. The opening is very well done.
Referring to, once again, Dave Marsh, who we quoted in the last episode, he wasn't quite as enamored with the television, the expanded television version, as he was with a satellite. He wrote that he thought the delay actually diminished the impact. He didn't like the Hawaiian scenery, which, by the way, was provided by United Airlines. He particularly didn't like what he referred to as the tractor in the cane field, which I assume he means is that yellow pickup that was just shown during early morning rain in the insert. He also wrote that it missed much of Elvis's onstage energy, overused the multi-screen montages, and actually made Elvis appear weirdly distanced from his audience. Got to be honest, I'm not sure that I agree with any of that at all, but how do you see what Dave Marsh wrote?
Yeah, no, I have to agree with you. It seems the performance is still the performance. I can understand from maybe a critical standpoint the television aspect of it. I mean, we talked a little bit about the inserts and about how a little bit stilted they are. The scenery, yeah, I mean, it might have given Dave some flashbacks, some nightmare flashbacks of all the Elvis films, that a lot of them were just travel logs showing a lot of footage. And Dave might have thought, here we are again, showing me all this, life on the island sort of things, where the performance itself that he saw was so magnificent that was likely all that he wanted. So I guess I can understand that, but it is television. It is the 70s. So I don't think it's it was very odd or strange for that time. But I can understand that he thinks it might have detracted a bit just from the raw energy of the performance itself.
I mean, he also makes the point that the multi-screen montages really date it to the 70s. But, I mean, you've made the point about, I guess the dangers or falling into the trap of being a little revisionist. I mean, it is what it is. It was 1973. It really was a stunning piece of television, really.
Sure, yeah.
One thing that's interesting, and we know that Marty Pasetta, when he was planning the special and when he told Elvis that he needed to lose a little bit of weight because he wanted to really use the close-ups, and he was really true to his word. There's some really great close-ups of Elvis superimposed on some wider shots of the stage and the audience. A lot of angles where the camera is actually on the arena floor looking up, so Elvis is sort of, appearing as this giant. Really, I think if you were Colonel Parker looking at that, you must have been absolutely ecstatic at the way Elvis was presented in close-up and with those angles. I mean, it was just, I don't know, I can't imagine a star being presented in a more favourable light. I mean, Elvis, of course, was looking great and the costume was great and everything was great, but certainly the camera angles, it just presented him so well, didn't it?
Well, sure it did. I mean, why did Marty Pasetta say to Elvis, you need to move and you need to lose weight? Because Marty Pasetta knew that Presley, at the heights of his magnetism and power, was a little bit leaner and moved on stage. He knew that to get the most out of this star, he needs to do these two things, and he needs to be shot in a certain way. So, no fool, Marty. I distinctly recall a couple of close-ups of Elvis's profile, and you see the, not to sound ridiculous, but you see the magnificence of the man's face, the line of his nose, the cheekbones. This camera could have stayed right there the whole time. But I know what you mean about the shots from the crowd. It was interesting. Crowd's eye view for one thing. And again, it's a bit of a commercial for future concerts. Here's the spectacle. It might not be quite like this in future shows, but you see him up there. The crowd is engaged. They're enamored of him. He's stalking the stage up there. Good shots from back there as well. So Marty knew that with Elvis, he had a wonderful visual. So then he shot it as such. So the product was on display in a really good way, which was good for everybody.
I think it all came together, didn't it? From the music to the costume, the production design, the lighting, everything just came together really beautifully. And I think it really is, as a whole, it really is a testament to the talent of everybody to actually bring it together.
And it's of its time, too. We talk about dated. Well, I live dated. I want something to look old school. So, I mean, we didn't want some sort of visionary Stanley Kubrick sort of presentation that we look at today and said, oh, it could have been released today. That would have flown in the face of Elvis and his times. So the fact that it does look a little bit 73, split screen, and the massive bell bottoms he's got on, I mean, that's kind of part of the thing, man. That's what we want. So you're right. Everything came together.
The album, of course, as we said, it went to number one. Looking at the album in isolation, and perhaps comparing it to some of Elvis's other 70s live albums, how do you think the album actually stands up on its own without the excitement of the visual spectacle?
Very well. I think it stands up very well. And I wrote an article a couple of years ago about breaking down Elvis's greatest music from individual decades in the 70s. And I realized that the bulk of my list was That's the Way It Is in Aloha from Hawaii. And I said, well, that's not really a good list that looks at his whole 70s output. Problem. Aloha from Hawaii is some of his greatest sounds he made, never mind the visuals. It's comprised of the greatest sounds he made in the 70s a lot of the times. We spoke about some of the versions that he did there. He never bettered before or after. They were just fantastic. Again, because all the aces were in their places and everything was lined up, I mean, that's what you can expect from this performance, from this whole concert. Everybody was on top of their game. So it comes as no surprise, but the songs themselves, the performances themselves, to answer your question, the record stands alone as well. It's fantastic. It's a wonderful, visual is great, sure, but again, 73, back in the day, records, people lived and died by their records, so the audio was all a lot of them needed, and with that record, they got wonderfulness, wonderful performances, and it sounded great with the technology, and it stands alone on its own fine. It's just fantastic performances. So the visual is a bonus. It takes you right up to the stratosphere, but just the songs, just the singing, fantastic. It's an excellent album and an excellent representation of him at one of his peaks.
I guess we have to be mindful of the circumstances of Aloha, but probably my favourite live album of the 70s is Live in Memphis, which was recorded at the Mid-South Coliseum the following year. And the reason being, I think to actually listen to the two, and without having the benefit of the vision of Aloha, which I think with the vision of Aloha, you can see the fun that everybody's having, and you can see the happy smiling faces, and you know that it's a brilliant performance. For me, without the vision, it doesn't quite live up to it. And I think there is, in Live in Memphis, for instance, there is just this sense of, it's certainly less inhibited, and there's this greater sense of fun. Now, we know that by the time they recorded this in Memphis, it was the fifth concert actually back in Memphis, so everybody was very relaxed, and it was a loyal hometown crowd, and the circumstances were very, very different. So I know we have to take that into account, but I don't know, there's just perhaps something a little restrained about parts of Aloha. Not all, of course, the showpieces stand up, but to get the real sense of fun and spontaneity and, the sort of the real joy of an Elvis concert audibly. Yeah, I don't know. For me, I think Memphis is perhaps the better album.
Yeah, that's legit. I can totally understand that. Polish, I mean, let's face it, Aloha from Hawaii, the album, I mean, it better sound polished. So it's polished. The performances are polished to the brightest, highest sheen you can get. If a big part of Elvis's thing is his feral animal strength, then sure, that's not going to be dominant in Aloha. It's going to be the polished, the magnificent looking man and the wonderful, wonderful performances. Where something like Memphis was just let it all hang out, and I'm back home and I'm comfortable. I'm looser. I don't feel the pressure of going all over the world with this show. Yeah, like you say, the fifth night, so things are right in the pocket. So I can understand that for sure. Aloha is just up on a pedestal, whereas I like to often say unburdened by greatness. I mean, the Live from Memphis doesn't have to be iconic, doesn't have to be magnificent. It's just, let's just be. And that ends up sometimes being some of the best stuff you hear is just the loose, fun stuff. So you're right. Good point.
We sort of get to some nitty-gritty of some of the politics involved now with the album. Now, we know that Felton Jarvis who was Elvis's personal producer, had been unwell, worse than unwell. He was in dire trouble health-wise. Elvis had funded a kidney transplant for him, and he was recuperating. Joan Deary is brought in to produce. Now, she's a very interesting lady. She worked at RCA for over 40 years, and she was in charge of A&R administration, artist and repertoire, under Steve Scholes. She was the first woman manager, director, and executive director in RCA Victor history, and she went on to be executive director of all A&R administration, and of course an archivist of Elvis's recordings, and would do great work there over the years. But she was in charge of bringing this album project together in quadraphonic. Took a bit of a dim view of Elvis's crew, it would seem, and were quite happy for them to not have the same involvement that they had on other projects. How do you see that sort of situation that was bubbling in the background?
I think it's a little odd because, well, I guess we got to look at 1973. I know that over the next 4 years, it was increasingly difficult to get Elvis into the studio. And what was even more difficult was to get him in the studio with an appropriate comfort level to record at his best. So a guy like Felton is one of the boys, right? I mean, who would he be more comfortable with? But I guess we got to look at the scope and the grandeur of the Aloha project. A lot of big players were brought in to pull this off. So the idea that might have been just a cutthroat business decision about what do we need, a comfortable friend of Elvis, not to diminish Jarvis's abilities, but let's just go for the best. Let's just bring somebody in who's gonna shine this up as bright as it can get.
And we're going to start to talk a little bit about money and a little bit about the back catalogue. Our main reference for this is Peter Guralnick once again, Careless Love, The Unmaking of Elvis Presley. Now, we refer to him a lot, not necessarily because we agree with all of his assertions, but his research and his primary sources are detailed, and he also had very, very good access to, documents and contracts and letters. So he is really, for this sort of stuff, I think a totally trusted source. And he has said to the effect that Joan Deary took a bit of a dim view of the technical ability of Elvis's crew and perhaps their work ethic as well. And she also was very unhappy, apparently, when they went to record at Stax Studios because she felt that the rig at Stax was outdated. And you sort of get the sense that they really want to tighten control at this point.
Yeah, and again, I can see that. I mean, you had a guy like Lamar Fike running the lights, didn't he? I mean, people are not with their degrees from school for working with Elvis. It's not so much they've learned it on the fly. I mean, that was the way it was back in the day as well. Let's not forget, just in Elvis world, it wasn't like this. But maybe it was time to go to the next level. And I mean, I don't understand the part about the Stax. A lot of fantastic records came out of Stax, but state of the art is state of the art, no matter what year it is, and people would come in with fresh eyes, see things differently, see where things could be changed. So I guess that makes sense. Again, they must have known by this point, don't rattle Elvis too much. Don't start putting in a bunch of new faces and sure as heck, don't mess with his boys. That's his comfort level, his insulation. So it's a little bit of a gamble, I think, but perhaps people like Deary and the people that were coming on the scene, they were like the Pasettas and the Binders and the Momans. They thought maybe we could shake it up and make some magic. Maybe he just needs a little bit of freshness. We know historically, maybe it didn't quite work out like they had hoped. But I guess you can't blame them for trying and for finding out what else could be got, from Elvis, could be had if they changed a couple of pieces. So I guess I can understand it.
RCA had this gold mine of back catalogue to exploit, and they really wanted to, and they wanted Colonel Parker out the way because he would be constantly meddling and causing trouble. So they thought the best way to do this would be to go to Colonel Parker with a deal. Essentially what they wanted to do was have complete control of releasing the material. Now this is interesting, just looking at some numbers here, Gary, about their earnings, or Elvis's earnings from record royalties at that time. And this is from Guralnick. Elvis received on average somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 a year in domestic royalties, with an estimated 33% additional in foreign payments. Now, I know that was a lot of money in 1973, and it's a lot of money now, but considering Elvis's place in recording history or his success, it's not a huge amount, is it? When you consider that Graceland cost six figures to run every month. Graceland and the touring operation and Elvis Presley Enterprises. Now, this is not all of his income, of course. This is purely record royalties, but it's really not a huge amount, is it?
No, it's not, and it's easy to look back with our current eyes. And again, so many people will say that because of Elvis Presley, because of his career, because of the highs and the lows, because of the positives and the negatives, people know how to have a career nowadays. People know how to function. People have been stung, the Bruce Springsteens, the Billy Joels. You look at the copyrights on their records, and after they've learned their hard lessons, the copyrights just say Billy Joel or Bruce Springsteen. People look after their things better now because of, a lot of it is because of what happened to Elvis Presley. I mean, people don't have managers today like Colonel Tom Parker because of Elvis Presley and what he went through, and because of the stuff that has come out. So the money thing is funny. I mean, nobody lived more extravagantly than Elvis. Nobody had less of an idea what a loaf of bread cost than Elvis Presley. Nobody had less of a concept of money and what things cost than Elvis because he just spent. So that obviously is factored in too with his earnings. He had to make, maybe millions a month to really stay afloat. So never mind. Also, we can get into the weeds about the business practices of RCA and of course the Colonel's business practices as well. The Colonel certainly wasn't hurting for money either. So while it sounds like a lot, you're right. I mean, when you compare it to other expenses and other, possible paychecks for certain things, whether it's films or tours, etc., it doesn't seem like a whole lot. So it's another thing to dig into in Elvis's story, the money he made and the money he didn't make too. So it is interesting that you talk about records. The estate still today loves to trot out numbers about the ridiculous boatloads of records the man has sold over the years, and yet these are the type of numbers, and this is right in what you might consider his prime. Certainly it's still prime earning years for him, and these are the numbers. So it is pretty interesting. The idea of anybody trying to freeze Colonel out, that was interesting you said that. I don't know who they think they're up against, but anyways, you're right about the numbers. They seem pretty low for a guy of Elvis's stature.
Rocco Laginestra came up with a figure of $3 million to basically buy the rights to the back catalogue. Through negotiations, that would go up to $5.4 million. There's this sort of, this urban myth or this general thought that the Colonel was on a 50-50 arrangement with Elvis. It wasn't that simple. In fact, as we're going to find out, it was a whole lot more complicated, perhaps in some ways not as bad and in other ways actually worse. So, Gary, there's some stuff here that I'd like to run through with you, and honestly, if you can make head nor tail of this, you are a lot smarter than me, which I think probably our listeners would have realised by now anyway. Okay, so let's try and get our heads around this a little bit. From now on, all record income would be split down the middle, with touring remaining at a 2/3, 1/3 division. Now, there was $400,000 tacked on to the $5.4 million at the front end and divided 75-25, and $5 million that represented the actual buyout was treated as a side deal to be divided equally. Now, here we go. There was, in addition, a new 7-year contract guaranteeing $500,000 a year against royalty earnings, 2 new albums and 4 singles, which Elvis would be contractually obligated to provide each year. Now, as you alluded to, Gary, this became a very contentious issue, and he did towards the end fail to live up to that. Now, moreover, where are we? Moreover, at the conclusion of the 7-year term, Elvis and the Colonel would each receive a $100,000 bonus not to be counted against royalties, and the Colonel got a number of contractual guarantees of his own. So here we go, I'm not sure that they did actually succeed in getting rid of him. He was to receive a $50,000 a year consulting fee for the duration of the contract for assisting RCA in the development of merchandising and promotion, for supplying RCA with merchandising and promotional material, plus $10,000 a year for exploiting merchandising rights on the expired contract, and for his assistance in helping RCA record tours in planning, promotion and merchandising in connection with the operation of the tour agreement. For the duration of the new contract, he was to receive a grand total of $1.35 million, plus 10% of RCA record tours profits off the top. All in all, the Colonel was guaranteed $1.75 million on top of his $2.6 million share of the buyout itself, and the $1.75 million that he would get as his share of the new recording contract, which meant that the Colonel would receive roughly $6 million to Elvis's $4.5 million from all the deals combined. What do you reckon about that?
Yeah, you need a visual aid, and I joke, but really, if you put up a chart is needed with arrows, and most of the arrows point to Colonel and the nearest bank. Like it's when you were reading that, I was thinking of managers and their clients, and I didn't get what I got was business partners. They were in business together. One guy did one thing and one guy did the other thing. Now, Joe on the street doesn't care one iota for Colonel Tom Parker, but he loves Elvis Presley and his records and his movies. When you get into the weeds about Elvis wanting to get out of contracts with Colonel and Colonel saying, okay, but here's what I've done and here's what it will take for you to get rid of me, which is the same thing RCA is running into here. This is why he needs his due he needs to be looked at honestly, and let's talk straight about Colonel, but that also includes the business. Elvis didn't care one iota about business. He didn't care nothing about anything in that realm at all. So he needed, and I alluded earlier to people like Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richard who went by the boards very, very early, before the 50s were even over, really, because there was nobody as ruthless as Colonel Tom Parker looking after their interests. So the craziness of the Colonel, the craziness of RCA, and the way Elvis was handled as an artist, we can look back at it and say, so poor, and yet look at the size of Elvis as a performer, as part of the fabric of American life. To think that he could have been bigger and could have meant more to people today staggers the mind. But when you read all these numbers and all this business, it just shows you that Elvis was an industry. There was so much going on that they could even spit out numbers like this, and there was so many deals like this. But Elvis and Colonel Tom seemed to be partners, and people like RCA knew, we want to get rid of Colonel Tom, so we're going to throw him boatloads of money and put him on salary, consulting fees and stuff. That's not getting rid of him. That's maybe maneuvering him out of the way, but he's still drawing boatloads of money. And I love that they have to go to Colonel for the merchandise, the promotional material, which Colonel basically controlled because of his side deals with everybody everywhere. So it's fascinating to read those numbers because it was a partnership. Elvis just all he did was sing like he did and perform like he did. But the business, it had to be done by somebody, and this is how much money there was to be made and how many people were in line to get their share, to get their angles looked after, to get their back end looked after. So the numbers are staggering, but this is the size of Elvis world that we could spend, days, weeks looking at things like these business deals and analyzing Colonel Tom and his role in all of these things. It's just fascinating. So there's some really interesting numbers you throw at us.
Joan Deary was looking after the releases of the older material and preparing some of this back catalogue to be re-released. They set in plan or set in place a schedule for a series of historical releases. Now, this is where it becomes a little difficult. It appears that it was going to be in direct conflict with the new product. And not only that, Joan Deary had gone ahead with these plans without consulting the Colonel. She was putting together initially a package called Elvis, a Legendary Performer. There was going to be a deluxe booklet with pictures, old recording pages, session notes, something we would expect perhaps in later years in some of these CD box sets. And the Colonel was essentially squeezed out. He obviously was not going to take that lying down, went to Rocco Laginestra and perhaps politely threatened him that, or they were going to fall out over this. And RCA then made some concessions. They actually delayed the release of the anthology album so it would not conflict with Elvis's new product, according to Peter Guralnick here. And as we said, all of these figures and this material was from Peter Guralnick because we trust his primary sources. The album release was quickly postponed until January, and the Colonel was henceforth included not just as an advisor, but as a paid consultant. So if they really wanted to squeeze him out, it didn't work.
No, it didn't work. And he's too enmeshed to be squeezed out. He's too enmeshed in, perhaps even as a comfort thing for Elvis, he could just cruise and live the way he wanted to live, fireworks on the lawn and motorcycles and whatnot, because he knew he had a ruthless, cutthroat manager looking after him, and he likely even knew Colonel is looking after me, maybe second behind the Colonel, but I am more than comfortable, so I'm okay with that. That could also be a thing too. But the Colonel is so enmeshed that I mean, RCA should have known. I guess it's worth a try if you can maneuver Colonel out of the way. But the back catalog thing is interesting to me because I understand the money to be made on somebody's back catalog. I can understand that, but you almost take the performer's legs out if he's still out there working. Like you say, there's competing product. I remember when Sinatra left Columbia and started releasing for Capitol, well, anything Columbia had in the vaults or anything they had, period. Of course, they were throwing out records left and right. The same with when Jerry Lee Lewis left Sun and had country music hits in the early 70s, while Sam Phillips went to the vaults and anything country that Jerry had recorded, he put together on a record. So, but then you get competing and the fans get confused. Who is this performer? Like, what is his thing? What is his bag? So, and it run the risk of making Elvis, glorifying his past. It becomes a Beach Boys thing. Nothing that's going on today matters as much as, look at this legendary performer stuff. Look at the old songs that he did. Wasn't he great? It becomes past tense. So it's a big battle because there's money to be made, but it also flies in the face of the money that can be made in the present going forward. Well, you're reducing me as an artist. It didn't really work that way for Elvis, but the back catalog thing is fascinating with any artist, really. But no, Colonel was never going to be outfoxed by amateurs like RCA executives. Come on, versus the Colonel.
And we should say too that from what we can understand, Elvis was not basically a passenger or excluded from this. He was involved in it, understood what was happening, and was fully supportive of the Colonel's actions. And in fact, bragged to some of the guys afterwards that the old Colonel had done it for them again. So it certainly wasn't an issue that he was an unwitting participant or an unwitting victim of this. He knew, as far as we can see, he knew what was going on.
That's true. And like I say, he was comfortable enough. Sure, if he had really wanted to expend the energy, he could have sat down with Colonel with papers and said, what's going on here? But like you say, he was bragging to the guys and he was okay.
It's a sort of an interesting concept, dilemma, the fact that he was now competing with his younger self, because really after Aloha, the record sales did taper off, and they were solid, but they certainly, the new material would never reach the heights of the old. So, and of course, he really became a touring act then, and the money was to be made in touring. For instance, on the New Year's Eve concert that he did at the end of 1975 on a freezing, icy night in Pontiac, Michigan, 62,000 people. It was a record gross for one night. It was over $800,000 for one night. That was a record for a solo artist at that time. So the money from the touring and from Vegas and the merchandising really was rolling in. So it certainly wasn't all bad news financially. But of course, in order to keep that money rolling in, you've got to keep working. You've got to keep touring, because both Elvis and the Colonel did tend to spend it as quickly as they made it, didn't they?
Well, they sure did. And they knew where there was money to be made. So record deals, current and going forward record deals, might not have been, they might have understood that it wasn't where the money was to be made, and it wasn't, a high priority. Colonel had control over the tours and the merchandising, and I think he likely knew that's where the money was. Joe Fan on the street, he sees Elvis coming to town, he's going. He's not going based on the song that's on the charts right now. If there's a song on the charts right now, sure, that helps. Again, it's all promotion. But at this point, Elvis was Elvis. And the tours, the live performances, it was a thing. And people, any fan that you stick a mic in will tell you about seeing Elvis here, seeing Elvis there. The concerts through the 70s, the touring was the thing. So, yeah, it became a different thing. He became a different type of performer in the 70s. And, I defend my list of best songs from the 70s being top-loaded with That's the Way It Is and Aloha from Hawaii, because while there's other good stuff that he recorded, the song Promised Land is one of my 2 or 3 favorite Elvis songs, the best performance he ever put on record, one of my favorite songs of all time. So that was still to come. But beyond that and a few others, yeah, looking back, we can see that, hit records and wonderful recorded performances that was kind of over. So Colonel knew that touring and merchandising was where the money was going to be at, I think.
I often wonder, I mean, I really do like Moody Blue from that was recorded at the Jungle Room sessions in 76, and then was obviously the title track of his final album. And I often wonder, just, obviously that has an immortality. I often wonder how that would have been seen had Elvis's career progressed beyond that, whether or not that would be seen as another Suspicious Minds or If I Can Dream, or just one of these signature era-defining songs, because I think that is really one of for me, that's one of the great songs of the 70s.
I agree. I really like the record. It was one that I bought early in my early days of collecting his albums. I had it on cassette, and I really like the album. It is typically mishmashy, live, not live, studio. I think one of the live performances, too, is like 74, so it even spans a few years. But what has come to be known as the Jungle Room Sessions, there were some great records there, very different. Even his voice was very different, and if fans could have, accepted a change. It's funny, though, I always think of Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain from the Jungle Room Sessions. Another perfect example of the blend that he did his whole career, the country, but with this gritty soul R&B feeling, the bass line itself in that song. Still at the end, he was doing the same sort of thing, blending country and R&B and blues and soul. So that record is indicative of what he did best, really, even though he maybe didn't sound as good as he had before. But it might have ended up being, like you say, a new and different direction. And it's just hard to conjecture what he would have done, because knowing what we know now, it was so not sustainable. The shape and the health he was in at the end. People ask me, and I always say, I think he would have had to have gone away somewhere for a time, disappeared, and gotten back to a mental and a physical health that he could go on living. But I kind of think country music might have been a thing for him. It still would have had the Elvis stamp on it, but it's an interesting point about Moody Blue, because it's a crisp, robust recording, and the production, of course, the overdubs always seem to work somehow, which is fascinating too, because strings and orchestras and whatnot wasn't always Elvis's thing. He recorded with his group and that was it. But yeah, it's a good record, and that song itself, Moody Blue, I think you're right. It might have been looked at differently, had he not died, and that was the last, album and the last single, and Way Down was on the charts. So interesting to conjecture that. We could do it all day for sure.
Earlier in the series, you said that really Aloha from Hawaii was probably his last high-profile, great artistic triumph. He, of course, continued to work right up until his death. When he passed away, he was due to fly out to Portland, Maine, to begin another tour. Was actually going to end that tour with 2 shows back in Memphis. He was then booked to open the 5,000-seat Hilton Pavilion as part of a big refurbishment of the Las Vegas Hilton. So, there was work stretching out ahead of him when he passed away. It's worth just briefly talking about the remaining few years on the road. One thing that I do take a little issue with Peter Gorolnik in Careless Love is I don't think he's entirely fair in the way that he selectively uses some of the concert reviews to create a picture the final few years. There were certainly some off nights, but if you listen to some of the unedited bootlegs of the band and of the Beach Boys and many of these other groups on the circuit, they had some off nights too. But even up until the very end, and even the very last concert at Market Square Arena, which, contrary to what was claimed, was not the Elvis in, the last concert was not the Elvis in Concert television special. There were some great shows, great tight shows, powerful shows right up to the end. In as much as he did struggle at times, I think the decline has been a little exaggerated. How do you see it?
I think that the narrative is basically sound, because when you were talking about the future, the shows that were planned and booked that Elvis never lived to perform, I'm shaking my head thinking, there's no way, like I can't envision Elvis Presley having lived one day longer than he did, knowing what we know about the final years and his health. And you referenced Elvis in concert. The visual there is much talked about, particularly by non-fans who like to point out the decline. We're seeing a performer die before our eyes. Like, I don't quite look at it that way, but let's face it, he was in very poor health, and it's amazing that he lived as long as he did. The narrative is the downward spiral, which again, like I say, is sound. And it fits the narrative to say the concerts were getting erratic. He was not sounding good. I mean, you can hear it from later live recordings. A simple thing like breath control, holding a note, there's incredibly different from even 2 or 3 years earlier. But like you say, he still had dynamism wired into his being. He could still turn it on when he was out there in front of fans. And I think even in Goralnik's book, while we see negative reviews of shows and whatnot, there's still interviews with his band members and whatnot that we've read in other sources as well that say, oh man, there was some nights where we were all in the pocket. He was on fire. He really delivered. So in a way, the guy could perform in his sleep, and I think he often maybe did. And so the highs and lows were related more to just highs and lows. Like you referenced a bunch of other groups and bands. It happens to everybody. Sometimes they're just not on. He had a lot of reasons to not be on night to night, just his health and his life. And I always think of the mental aspect of the round and round. Maybe that's why he died when he did, because he's thinking, I got to do this again. I got to go on another tour and go round and round and round. I'm not getting anything out of this at all. I'm just supporting a lot of people, which would have kept him going as well. I can't just quit and look after my health. People are going to lose their homes. So there's a lot going on. The final years, I always think of Bono from U2. He taught me, he actually said in one interview, you cannot have the Elvis myth without the decline, without the years. It's part of the story. And like I say, countless artists have benefited from Elvis's wonderful songs in 56, but they've also benefited from his maybe being fleeced by Colonel Tom, by the concert merry-go-round, by the health issues. He taught people that way too. He was, his life was a lesson for others, what to do and what not to do. So the final years definitely could be a podcast series on their own. Fascinating stuff, and not all bad, like you say.
Okay, well, we do want to end on a positive note, because we've been talking about this wonderful, wonderful entertainment event, about what happened behind the scenes, and about all of the really incredible, talented people that came together to make it something special. So, Gary, do you have any final thoughts or final comments on Aloha from Hawaii?
The 70s is not to be discarded, like we just said, for reasons that are maybe kind of negative as well, but let's face it, man, the 70s contain Aloha from Hawaii, and those performances and those images, that's almost right up to the end. And you mentioned Moody Blue as well. We can talk about other peaks that he was able to achieve. But almost near the end, in 1973, he conquered the world again, and there's no shine that's been added to it since his death, or 50 years down the line. Looking back on it as what it was in 1973, it is nothing short of a triumph of sight and sound. But again, we talked about the product. At the core of it all, the spectacle and the numbers and the sales and the billions of people, at the core of it all is a fantastic looking man singing in a stunning fashion, wonderful arrangements of great songs with a crack band behind him. It is the pinnacle of what he could do, particularly at that point in his life. So even if you look at the 70s as a whole, including all artists, it is definitely a highlight. It is iconic in the extreme. And at the base of all that, it's not just spectacle or carnival. It's a man exhibiting an extraordinary craft and a wonderful gift singing wonderful songs wonderfully.
Well, I think that's a perfect sentiment to end on, Gary. It's been a real pleasure and a thrill to really get to the bottom of Elvis Aloha from Hawaii, and I would really like to thank you for your efforts helping us to put this together and going to so much effort, and also for your really wonderful insights and commentary on the music that we had in episode 2, which is the real Elvis fans episode, I think.
My pleasure, George. Thank you very much for your hard work. It's wonderful to come and talk about Elvis with a guy like yourself, and I look forward to future stuff we can do together.
We really do hope you've enjoyed this 3-part special on Elvis Aloha from Hawaii as much as we enjoyed researching it and putting it together for you. Now, don't forget the newsletter. There's one for each episode in this brief series. In this one, we also have a bit of a look at the album art for the double album and the single Steamroller Blues. We didn't really get to talk about that in the podcast, but it's interesting that they had this iconic image of Elvis who had never looked better in this stunning jumpsuit design, and they didn't use it on either the album or the single. So we'll just have a bit of a look at that. And don't forget, you can keep up with Gary's work at soulrideblog.com. Lots of great stuff there on Elvis and the Beach Boys, film and book reviews. Really is a wonderful site. Gary is also on social media as well, and you can hear him at the Cocktail Nation podcast, cocktailnation.net, with his regular segment Words with Wellesley. We learned in our series on Aloha from Hawaii, when Elvis arrived in Honolulu on January 9, 1973, several days ahead of the rehearsal concert and the satellite broadcast, he was helicoptered from the airport to the Hilton Village for a filmed reception with fans where he had a few brief words with an old friend, Tom Moffatt, known affectionately to everyone as Uncle Tom. And let's just remind ourselves of this little moment.
Me up to get lays from the crowd. Hey, Elvis, how are you?
I'm all right.
Good to see you. Welcome back.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
You look
Glad
great.
to be back. Thank you very
birthday,
much.
one day late.
Thank you very much.
Nice reception, huh?
Yeah, very, very nice. Yeah.
How long you be in town this time, today?
Well, about a week, I would imagine.
It's going to be a big show Saturday.
Oh,
It's Sunday morning.
It's got to be. I hope it's good, you know.
I'm sure it will be.
I'm going to do my best.
Elvis, you got a lot of people here want to give you lays and say hello to you.
Okay, fantastic.
The biggest one since Alaska.
It's the biggest thing I've ever done.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Elvis.
Appreciate it.
Now, Tom Moffatt was a local DJ and concert promoter, and according to his 2016 obituary in Hawaii News Now, he made his name in the islands in 1957 when he brought Elvis Presley to perform before thousands of adoring fans. Now, Tom Moffatt had been promoting Elvis's Hawaiian fan club around the time of Love Me Tender, and he organised a competition to actually win the hat that Elvis wore in the movie, and they received 53,000 entries, and this alerted Colonel Parker to Elvis's enormous local popularity. Elvis subsequently played 3 very successful shows in Honolulu over November 10th and 11th, 1957. This was promoted by Tom Moffatt, and this cemented the relationship. In a subsequent interview, Tom Moffatt told Hawaii News that Elvis's first show in Hawaii was one of the most exciting events he had ever presented. So keen to secure Elvis for his first touring show after discharge from the Army, Tom Moffatt actually bailed up Colonel Parker, who was on vacation in Hawaii while Elvis was still in Germany at that point, and secured a commitment on the promise of a huge petition signed by local fans urging Elvis to come back to Hawaii, and the result was the famous USS Arizona Memorial Benefit in 1961. It raised over $65,000, which was more than 10% of the final cost of the project. Now, in an interview with Dutch television, Tom Moffatt said the idea for the benefit aspect was Colonel Parker's alone, responding to news that the entire memorial project was about to collapse through lack of funding. And as they did in a later benefit show in Macomb, Mississippi in 1975, Elvis and Colonel Parker covered all their own expenses for the Arizona Memorial Benefit Show. Now, we do expand a little bit on Tom Moffatt's biography in our companion newsletter. He was described by the Honolulu Star-Advertiser as one of the most influential figures in the Hawaii entertainment industry. Now, he was the first rock DJ in Hawaii and a pioneer of Top 40 radio, had one of the top-rating radio programs in the 60s on local station KPOI. And we can see that he was clearly liked and trusted by Elvis and Colonel Parker as well. He was given access to interviews, including long distance by phone to Germany, and he later brought some Hawaiian fans who had won a contest to actually visit Elvis in Hollywood on the set of Blue Hawaii. So, over 6 decades as a concert and event promoter, Tom Moffatt brought a huge number of major artists to Hawaii. According to his obituary, he presented almost every big name in the music business at least once, including classical concerts, ballet and musical theatre, and he was the leading Hawaiian promoter of mega concerts at the 50,000-seat Aloha Stadium, and he ran record labels and was strongly committed to actively promoting local artists as well. He continued to work as a promoter and DJ into his 80s. He passed away in 2016, aged 85. So like Eddie Sherman and Don Ho, both of whom featured prominently in the story of Aloha from Hawaii, Tom Moffatt is another fascinating part of the adventure, and he played a crucial role in cementing Elvis's relationship with the Hawaiian people, which had developed over a number of years through music, movies and philanthropy, and this culminated in this global music event, Aloha from Hawaii, in January 1973. So Tom Moffatt, a pivotal figure in Elvis's relationship with Hawaii over many, many years. We know that one of the reasons that they put together this satellite broadcast was because they did want to do something for the fans overseas in the absence of touring. Now, we know that there might have been some issues with Colonel Parker's citizenship and his passport, and you made the point that it was a little bit ridiculous that, Elvis couldn't go without Colonel Parker, even though someone like Joe Esposito would have been a perfectly competent and, suitable, road manager for these remote tours. But do you think there was possibly an element that Colonel Parker might have been, given Elvis's propensity to carry guns and some personal medication, do you think there might have been an element of Colonel Parker thinking that Elvis needed to be protected, perhaps from unfortunate incidents with customs?
And this is why Elvis Presley requires study, not just buying the record, not just reading the book, but reading all kinds of books and getting all kinds of material from all kinds of sources, because it's never black and white. It's so easy. When I first read about Colonel and his Dutch heritage and his life, I thought, oh, okay, well, there you go. That's the only reason Elvis never toured worldwide. Because, like you say, Colonel thought, I really can't go with them because of my immigration status. So then if I can't go, Elvis can't go. But I think another layer is Colonel was concerned if Elvis hung out with entertainment types in another part of the world, somebody might get in his ear and Elvis might think, wow, maybe I am getting robbed, or maybe I can do better. Colonel wanted to keep him insulated. So Colonel can't travel with him. Colonel doesn't want to lose his property. Those are very probably true, but cynical ways to look at it. I think the logistics, the hugeness of a world tour, a European tour, an Asian tour, whatever, would have been a big ask for these. And Joe Esposito, as competent as he was, and as competent as Elvis's gang was, they were just good old Southern boys or Chicago like Joe. Maybe it would have been a big ask for them to put together all the business that would have had to be done. And then you throw in another part of, Elvis travels through the States, no problem. He can tour the States, no problem. If he's got medical issues, he can fly in this doctor or fly in that doctor, see local doctors. Everybody loves Elvis. They'll do whatever he wants or he asks of them. It might have been different. Well, it would have been different overseas. And it might have been a big ask for Elvis to just to not be Elvis, to not pack heat, to not pack his shoebox full of whatever he needed, whatever he thought he needed to live. So there's too much. There's a lot going on. It's too easy to say bad Colonel wouldn't let him tour. And who knows? You read about, too, the hard slogs through the South or the Midwest. Those concert tours were difficult, physically straining on Elvis or whatever, and his level of, dialing into that was obviously making it a challenge as well. It would have been a big ask. Maybe it would have been one of those challenges we talk about. Maybe it would have been, wow, this is new. I'm going to rise to the occasion. But part of me thinks it would have been too hard in many ways. So maybe there's lots to talk about. So certainly, I'll go to one place, my beloved Hawaii, stick a camera in there, broadcast it to the whole world. I mean, it makes perfect sense. And we could get into the weeds as to the whys and wherefores, but it's a perfect way to go around the world for Elvis. And it worked out just like that, as we've seen.
Our previous episodes on Elvis Aloha from Hawaii, would really like to say a big hello and a big shout out to Adam. Now, he very kindly and very generously sent us a huge amount of background information on the ticketing to the Honolulu International Centre, and lots more too. The souvenir ticket design was absolutely fascinating and something that I'd never even considered in research. So we did actually manage to get an image of that into the episode 3 newsletter, very much thanks to Adam's heads up. Now, Adam's done some incredible research on this, and Adam, we are really grateful to you for sharing this fantastic work with us, and we respect it. Has a big personal significance for you as well. And Gary, some great news. Adam's work and research is being recognised officially, and of course it's the 50th anniversary of Aloha coming up, so this is going to be something that's going to be celebrated at Graceland. So Adam, big congratulations to you. The recognition is thoroughly deserved, and thank you so much once again for sharing that with us.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. It's cool to see such things and cool to have him get some recognition. I love that. That's great.
You can get in touch with us at DEC4podcast.com or leave a comment or question on SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, or our social media. Follow Gary Wells at soulrideblog.com, your home for vintage leisure, and Oliver Crocker at devonfirebooks.com, and at The Bill Podcast on Patreon or your preferred platform. Check out some great travel videos and tips from Steve Collins on his YouTube channel, Steve Collins Traveller, formerly Please Tell Me Where to Go. Our original instrumental theme and mellow sounds are thanks to Detlef Wolf and hardworking Gainesville, Europe's top Tom Petty tribute band out of Germany. Find them at gainesville-band.com. We take some external guidance on the fair use of potentially copyrighted material for commentary and critique. Details at our website. The DEC4 podcast is available under Creative Commons. This has been George Fairbrother. Thank you for listening.